how to land on my feet. I have this way of finding trouble. It's never far. Wherever I go, take one step after another. You gotta move like a rolling stone. Hey! You gotta move like a rolling stone. Oh yeah! Hey! You gotta move like a rolling stone. Oh yeah! Well, I woke up this morning with the devil knocking on my door. Well, he came without warning with a deal, you know, I just couldn't ignore. I do believe, my pretty lady, that it's time for me to move along. Take one step after another. You gotta move like a rolling stone. Hey! You gotta move like a rolling stone. Oh yeah! Hey! You gotta move like a rolling stone. Oh yeah! You gotta move like a rolling stone. Oh yeah! Hey! You gotta move like a rolling stone. Oh yeah! Hey! You gotta move like a rolling stone. Oh yeah! Hey! You gotta move like a rolling stone. Oh yeah!
T-minus 15, 14, 13, 12. You do 11. 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 You do 11.
Phantom Power. Okay. Hey there, folks. I'm gonna start now. There we are. I just had like a little panic. I was all ready to go live, and then I realized I wasn't making noise. I gotta check two things real quick, or one thing really. Okay, that's working. Okay, cool. All right, I'm using a new setup, so thus my confusion and all that kind of stuff. Hey everybody, cheers. It's Canada Day, and that's weird. It's not supposed to be weird, but it kind of is. Allow me to explain. So, I live in Canada. I grew up, my whole entire life has been in Canada, aside from when I have gone away from Canada for reasons of visiting other places. Am I laggy? I feel like I'm laggy. Chat, you'll have to tell me if I'm laggy, assuming anyone's watching, which is a bit of an assumption given that I am a small streaming Andy and that it was very spur of the moment. It wasn't really very spur of the moment. I've been wanting to hop on and do stuff for a while today, but I had a million things that I was doing, and then I wanted to get this all set up, so I'm using a proper microphone, not just the cute little one that I normally have been using, and my digital interface, and getting all of those bits and pieces to work was a neat challenge. So that's been fun. Anyways, it's Canada Day. I am not entirely sure that I would call myself a proud Canadian. In many regards, I am a proud Canadian in the sense that this is a pretty goddamn good country. It does a lot of good stuff. It has its problems. I'm looking at you, Ottawa, dealing with more fucking convoy protester peoples. But it's not terrible here. That said, Canada Day, the celebration of all the Canada-ness, is difficult. And it's difficult because Canada was, I don't know if you know this, stolen land. We signed treaties so it wouldn't be stolen, and those treaties are neat. And I think it's fair to say that we did us a little bit of genocide. And that's not actually a good thing. That's kind of terrible. And it's hard to be proud of that. It's hard to go out there and be like, yay, Canada, woohoo, when we're still doing the genocide. That's a hard pill to swallow. And yet here we are. Things are, I think, better for Indigenous people than they have been in, I don't know, since we showed up. But that's not really saying a lot. I hate to be the one to say it, but we've kind of fucked up, and we haven't acted with courtesy or good intentions or any of that shit, and we're gonna hear about it now, and we deserve to hear about it now. This is how things are. So, as a left-leaning dirtbag socialist living in Canada, I thought I would take some time today, among other things. I think I will probably ramble for a while, but I wanted to take some time and look into restorative justice. Restorative justice is something that we, the white folk, often misunderstand. I don't honestly know enough about it to be able to speak properly on the subject, so we're going to learn. But I know that it's not what the common mythos is, which is that, you know, if you're indigenous, you just don't have to go to jail ever, and if you kill a guy, you go to a sweat lodge and then they let you out. Like, that's clearly bullshit. And I'm fairly certain indigenous people don't want that. Just going to turn my mic volume down a little bit, and hopefully it just looked like it was peaking a bit. Sorry. Blah, blah, blah. New setup. So that's my thinking. It's a weird time to be Canadian. The convoy is a good example of that. Sorry, I'm moving shit on my desk here. The convoy is a good example of that, because if you know anything about Canada and Canadian history and Canadian politics and Canadian current state, the convoy was a fascist uprising. This seems to get missed by a lot of people, including a lot of Canadians, admittedly. And I don't say that as like the hyperbolic left-wing person going, oh, they put peanut butter on my sandwich, the fascists. I mean, it's literally the people who organized it, the stated goals. It was all about doing a fascism. And it was a very effective movement in that it convinced a lot of people that that wasn't what it was going for, when in fact it was. And that's uncomfortable because, you know, Canada so rarely ends up on the national stage for anything other than, look, our Prime Minister's handsome. Isn't he a handsome fellow? And there was that time when he said something somewhat woke a few years ago and then, you know, doesn't do anything progressive. You know, that shit's weird. That's what we normally get. So when the attention came onto us, it was uncomfortable. We like to think of ourselves as kind and wonderful and super sweet and genteel folk. And one could argue, maybe we're not. So, we're going to talk a little bit about restorative justice. I don't know how that related. It related in my mind, but here we are. I'm rambling. It's a Friday afternoon. Normally I'd be working, but it's Canada Day, and I'm drinking beer. So enough brouhaha. Let's see what we can learn. All right, so just gonna pop over to this view here where we have our awesome web browser. And I'm gonna start off with just typing in Restorative Justice Canada. I'll add the Aboriginal. What the hell? So this is from Canada.ca, which is, surprisingly, the Government of Canada. So the Government of Canada supports restorative justice initiatives across the country, including those supporting Indigenous communities and youth. So restorative justice isn't just for Indigenous justice as actually a whole philosophy. It just sort of particularly pertains, there's a lot of Indigenous communities that are looking to explore and implement this kind of stuff. So that's why I think it's kind of neat. Why is my mic volume suddenly there? That's weird. I wonder what happened. That's fucked. Anyways, I turned it up. Hopefully it's loud enough you can hear. If anyone's watching, feel free to pipe in and chat, whether I'm quiet, loud, too loud, ugly, whatever. All right, so Canadians expect to live in a society where the criminal justice system is fair and impartial, responds to the harms caused by crime, and helps to keep them safe. An effective justice system encourages meaningful engagement and accountability and provides an opportunity for healing, reparation, and integration. Right off the bat, this is a perfect world kind of answer. And yeah, I like all those things. I don't think that any country's Department of Justice fits this, or justice system fits this criteria. We're Canada is less maybe notorious for this than the States, but we do have that school to prison pipeline, and we do use our policing to control and demean the people who we're supposed to be looking after. So that's a thing that we do. But from a perfect world perspective, yeah, I do agree with this. I am not a prison abolitionist. I am a massive prison reform advocate, but I do believe that there's a necessity for taking a time out. I believe that the cops need to drastically be changed, but that there's still a need for police. This is my own opinion. A lot of people on the left will think I'm a filthy fasci for saying that. A lot of people on the right will think I'm a vile communist. I don't know. Hate me however you want. Anyways, in recognition of Restorative Justice Week, November 15th to 22nd, the Honourable Dave Lametti, Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, is highlighting the Government of Canada's continued support to restorative justice initiatives across the country. Through the funding announced today, Indigenous people and blah, blah, blah. This actually isn't what I'm looking for. I was kind of looking for like a what is. There's a report on practices, all sorts. There's got to be like if I just add what is restorative justice, I just want to sort of set the bar. We'll find some Wikipedia article or whatever. Oh, there's one from the Canadian Department of Justice that actually looks like it might have an answer to what we're looking for. So, restorative justice refers to an approach to justice that seeks to repair harm by providing an opportunity for those harmed and those who take responsibility for the harm to communicate about and address their needs in the aftermath of a crime. Restorative justice provides opportunities for victims, offenders, and communities affected by crime to communicate directly or indirectly about the causes, circumstances, and impacts of that crime and to address their related needs. It's based on understanding that crime is a violation of people and relationships and is based on principles of respect, compassion, and inclusivity. That's an interesting phrase, honestly, because I don't think of crime. I think crime is a violation of people and relationships, absolutely, but we throw a lot of extra stuff in there. Like, I don't know, just as an example, selling drugs. If you're selling drugs, that's not a violation of people and relationships. But we criminalize it and we put people in jail for it. And my own 2 cents on the subject, I feel like maybe it's kind of dumb. But at a more Puritan kind of perspective, a pure view of what the justice system should be, that's probably accurate. Restorative justice encourages meaningful engagement and accountability and provides an opportunity for healing, reparation, and reintegration. It uses processes, including conferences, dialogues, and circles, and is guided by skilled facilitators. It's a flexible process and can take different forms depending on the community, program, case, participants, or circumstances. And uses processes that may take place at all stages of the criminal justice system and can be used with adults and youth. And it's used in every province or territory, and is supported by legislation and federal, provincial, and territorial government programs and policies. Restorative justice contributes to a criminal justice system that is accessible, compassionate, and fair, and promotes the safety and well-being of Canadians. I enjoy that they've said, what is restorative justice? And then not answered that question. That's so very Canadian. Yeah, that's a pretty half-assed explanation. Let's just continue. This is from Edutopia, and it's what the heck is restorative justice? That sounds like a more interesting thing. Ooh, George Lucas Educational Foundation. With the right training and... Oh, fuck off. I don't want to get the full experience. I want no experience. With the right training and support, restorative justice can prove more effective than traditional discipline measures in building a stronger school community. Yeah, you know what? I'm not finding. I was expecting like some Wikipedia page to be the top thing. Let's just take a quick eyeball. There we go. Restorative justice, Wikipedia. It's an approach to justice where one of the responses to a crime is to organize a meeting between the victim and the offender, sometimes with representatives of the wider community. The goal is for them to share their experience of what happened, to discuss who was harmed by the crime and how, and to create a consensus for what the offender can do to repair the harm from the offense. I'm wrong about the terminology I'm looking at. Restorative justice is kind of, it's an important thing. What I'm looking for is the alternative justice systems, or not justice systems, but approaches to justice that Indigenous folks have been exploring. So let's just see. Maybe I got the wrong word. It wouldn't be the first time. Let's go alternative justice Canada. First thing, restorative justice. It seems like this is kind of a big deal. What I'm looking for, what I'm wanting to talk about, is you hear about scenarios where, for example, somebody, an indigenous person, does some kind of law breaking, and you hear about their case in the court process getting essentially handed over to more traditional processes for applying justice, and also there's like reconnection with culture and family and stuff, and that's what I'm looking for. I don't know what the appropriate wording is. I suck. Because restorative justice, from what I'm seeing here, restorative justice is about taking, having that accountability conversation, having that moment where people just engage with the persons they've harmed or the families that they've harmed, and talk about things. Alternative dispute resolution isn't what we're looking for. This is third-party negotiation. Sentencing circles, which can be part of the court processes but are not separate courts in and of themselves. The court invites interested members of the community to join the judge, prosecutor, defense, police, social services, and community elders, along with the offender, the victim, and their families and supporters, to meet in circle format to discuss the offense, the factors that might have contributed to it, sentencing options, and ways of reintegrating the offender into the community. Sentencing circles, this is a little bit more in line with what I'm looking for. Sentencing circles can be a valuable way of getting input and advice from the community to help a judge set an appropriate and effective sentence. Often the circle will suggest a restorative community sentence involving some form of restitution to the victim, community service, and treatment and counseling, and/or a period of custody. It is important to note, however, that the judge is not bound to accept the circle's recommendations. Sentencing circles have been used in much of the country, mostly at the provincial/territorial court level, in minor criminal cases involving Aboriginal offenders and their victims. Various Supreme Court of Canada decisions have interpreted changes to the criminal code that instructed courts to consider alternative sentences for all offenders and to pay particular attention to the circumstances of Aboriginal offenders. The Supreme Court found that sentencing judges must examine the unique factors which may have played a part in bringing a particular Aboriginal offender before the courts, and the types of available sanctions and sentencing procedures, including sentencing circles, which may be appropriate in light of the offender's Aboriginal heritage and history. That's not what I'm looking. Okay, so that was sort of essentially what I'm looking for. Let's see if we can find an example. So we're just gonna go sentencing circles. Yeah, look at that. It showed up right at the top. Is this the same document we were just looking at? No. Let's see. Goals, implementation. For more information, lessons learned. Okay, that's not what we're looking for. Steps to justice.ca. This looks interesting. Sentencing circles are an alternative to a sentencing hearing and is a community-based process where community members try to agree on an appropriate sentence that everyone is satisfied with. Okay, that's sort of the stuff that we've already talked about. Why would we give examples? I don't know if they can give examples. I would imagine they can, but what do I know? creativespirits.info, circle sentencing from them. Let's just take a look at this. So, circle sentencing, and if you want to buy McAfee Total Protection, it's all yours. Circle sentencing aims to avoid gaol time, jail time, obviously, but in the French, gaol, maybe, for Aboriginal offenders by bringing them together with elders. The offender must plead guilty, and punishments are not mild. The system has many benefits for all. Okay, so selected statistics. So, number of circles held in New South Wales. Oh, this is Aboriginal as in Australia, I think. Between 2005 and 2010, 500. Let's see if we can find Canada stuff. This looks interesting. R.V. Moses and sentencing circles. A case comment. Let's take a look. This might be a U.S. thing. It's not clear to me. Tallahassee Journal of Legal Studies. Licensed under blah, 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 blah. Are we going to get some information, or are we going to just... Let me guess. The sentencing circle derives from the First Nation concept of the talking circle. A talking circle is a First Nation method of physical, mental, emotional, and social healing. It's a mode of resolving disputes, extending insight, and resolving affairs in which all participants meet as equals and speak openly. Each person has the right to speak without interruption, and others must listen. Mutual respect and community responsibility guide the process. It is a far cry from the adversarial talk of the traditional courtrooms where, at the end of the day, the best talker wins. This is actually why I wanted to talk about this, because I don't know if you've noticed, but legal systems, especially in Western countries, are kind of shitty. That's a thing that they're doing. They're being all shitty. And it's unfortunate and kind of scary just how much shitty they're doing. I'm referring obviously about to the recent fun activities of the U.S. Supreme Court, but our here in Canada, our judicial system ain't a whole lot better, and the whole way that we approach the judicial system is we have police who are the violent long arm of the law who come in to bust heads and stop crime, but they don't focus on a lot of crimes. So they focus on the easy crimes. That sounds perhaps mean, but they kind of are guilty of that. Why did it sound like someone was in my house? Hey, if I get murdered on stream, that'll be cool. We're very adversarial, and the talking circle is a whole different approach. It's where people get the opportunity to speak their case and speak in their own way and in their own words, and that isn't what happens in a legal battle, right? Legal battles are oratorical and full of particular legal flourish, and if you don't understand the legal system, you're pretty much screwed. Right? That's why, the man who defends himself in court has a fool for a client, but ching, because it's not quite so simple as, hey, I didn't do a bad thing, or I did a bad thing, but here's why. Here's my life. Here's why I wound up in this spot. That doesn't happen. So I like this as a something to consider for an alternative perspective. In a sentencing circle, the participants in a conventional criminal sentence hearing, the accused and counsel, Crown Counsel, and the judge, are joined by others normally excluded from the process, the victims of the offense, the police officers involved, and members and officials of the accused First Nation community. Tables and chairs are arranged in a circle. To encourage the participation of the offender, the judge declares the maximum possible terms of sentence. Once this and any other appropriate opening statements are made, each person seated in the circle has an equal opportunity to speak about the needs of the offender and of the victim, about any constraints on the community's participation in the rehabilitation of the offender, or about any other concerns the participants might have. Perhaps most significant is the opportunity for the victim, the offender, and the community to speak at this crucial stage of the criminal process. They are the people who will be most affected by the sentence. Therefore, they should be the main participants in the sentencing process. I like that. Because some degree of consensus is required, the process might continue for hours or even for days. The ideal result is a sentence shaped by all participants and endorsed by the community that will be participating in its implementation. The circle has been employed only rarely in the criminal sentencing process in Canada, mostly in northern and western Canada. This note examines R.V. Moses, one of the earliest reported cases in which a sentencing circle was used. In his reasons, Stuart Terror, CTJ, whatever CTJ could stand for, I'm going to say court justice, court jester, county jumper, undertakes an extensive survey of the merits of the process. So, Philip Moses was a 26-year-old member of the, and I'm going to say this wrong because I am an idiot, but Nacho-Nyak Dun First Nation in Mayo, Yukon. He was found guilty of theft and of carrying a weapon for the purpose of committing an assault. He had a prior record of 43 convictions with a total of almost 8 years of jail sentences. He was assessed by a number of professionals as having significant dysfunctional coping skills, for which treatment had been suggested, but had never been carried out. In Stuart J's opinion, this was an appropriate case for a sentencing circle, not because there were high hopes for a successful rehabilitation of the offender, but because no other options had worked. In the judge's word, what could be lost in trying? After the conviction was entered, the court was adjourned for 3 weeks, during which time the probation officer made inquiries as to whether the First Nations community and Moses' family wished to be involved in the sentencing. The RCMP were asked by the court to canvass the larger community for any interest it might have in participating in the circle. 2 Crown prosecutors visited Mayo 2 days before the sentencing to talk to the RCMP, probation officer, and members of the First Nation. Moses was given a suspended sentence coupled with a 2-year probation order. The sentencing plan was divided into 3 stages, with reviews planned for the end of each stage. The first stage required Moses to reside with his family on its trapline for 2 months. This was intended to reintegrate him into the family lifestyle and the family itself. The second stage required him to attend a 2-month alcohol rehabilitation program in BC. The third stage involved his return to the family home in Mayo and an alcohol-free life. The First Nation leadership in Mayo committed itself to providing support and counseling services and to assist Moses in his search for employment. The distinctiveness of the circle is summarized by 2 features that emerge from its use in sentencing: the assumption of greater responsibility by both the offender and the community, and the less adversarial nature of the process. That's a huge one in my opinion. By participating directly in the hearing rather than speaking through her lawyer, the offender assumes greater responsibility for both her prior actions and her sentence. The circle expands the basic rights set out in the criminal code, namely the offender's right to speak on her own behalf before the sentence is pronounced. However, essential to her willing participation is the understanding that she will not face greater jeopardy simply because she is candid. The offender must assert a commitment to her own rehabilitation, but at the same time, Judge Stewart notes, she must not be burdened with too much responsibility. The community assumes responsibility for the sentence to be set down. This commits the community to participate in the rehabilitation and healing of its members. The involvement of the community reminds the offender that she belongs. By meeting and talking in the circle, everyone acknowledges their shared responsibility for community problems. Inevitably, certain members of the community will bear the weight of this collectively assumed responsibility by taking active roles in the sentence. Otherwise, the sentence will not succeed. Judge Stewart emphasizes the need for the expansion of the circle to community members whose ability to contribute is not already stretched to their limit by other commitments. The other feature is that the sentencing circle... hit the wrong button. The other main features of the sentencing circle is less adversarial and less confrontational than the conventional sentencing process. The physical layout of a sentencing circle offers an alternative hierarchical and adversarial... hierarchical and adversarial aspects are minimized. In Moses, all participants remained seated during the circle. Counsel for the Crown was seated directly opposite the offender, his family, and his counsel. The RCMP officers, First Nation officials and members, probation officers, and others were seated elsewhere within the circle. A second outside circle was provided for latecomers. The physical layout shifts the focus away from the legal professionals and concentrates it on the parties most directly affected by the crime and by the sentence. The professional monopoly of the sentencing process is challenged, and lay participation is encouraged. The changed physical setting and the rule that all participants have an equal opportunity to speak breaks down the traditional domination of the proceedings by judge and counsel. I can speak to that just from my own very limited experience, but there is if you've ever been involved in a Canadian court, and I'm assuming it's probably the world over. I went in for the purposes of getting one of my children what's called a PCHAD, protective order that basically says that they are fucking up with drugs and they're going to be taken into custody for a week-long detox that is not optional. Alberta has these, other places don't. So that's kind of a thing. In order to get one, you have to go and plead your case to the judge, and the judge has to decide whether they agree or not. Or I think that's the case. I think it was the extension of the PCHAD by a number of days that might have been the thing. Anyways, not important. I had to go in, and I was given the gist of like when you walk in, you bow, which I'm like, wait, what? Why the fuck am I bowing him? Okay, fine, I'll do it. And then I don't give a shit who you are, right? I'm a person, you're a person. If we're talking like two people. That's fucking period, end of sentence. That's all there is to it. That was not the case here. And it's not that I walked in like all smug and was like, I'm going to say my piece and say however. There's like a natural, you cross the threshold and you're like, yes, I will answer your question. Like it's a very weird and intimidating process. And I could see how changing that setting would completely alter the way that process went, and for all parties. The functions of Crown and defense are nevertheless preserved in the circle process. The Crown is a participant and nothing interferes with its duty and role of representing the larger interests of the state. A feature of the circle is that the Crown's assumptions about the efficacy of the proposed sentence can be tested by the community. Defense counsel continues to represent all interests of the client. In spite of the preservation of the traditional role of counsel, all those present are encouraged to participate. Because of the broad range of participants, the nature and quality of information is enhanced. Stereotypes about the accused and her relationship to the community and misconceptions about the victim cannot be resorted to in the face of factual information from all participants. Stuart J. writes, the court rarely appreciates whether the sentence resolves or exacerbates the fundamental problems promoting crime. While the court knows that problems exist, the sentencing process encourages willful blindness and about many relevant circumstances. In comparison to the traditional sentencing process, the circle breathes life into the portrayal of the facts, and as a result, the potential for the realization of sentencing objectives is increased. The context is provided, and with the possible result that the solution to the sentencing problem becomes obvious and compelling. Just as the sentencing circle may provide a more realistic view of the context in which criminal behavior occurs, it may provide the community with greater insight into the limitations of the justice system. Stuart J. notes that the public reliance on the justice system is excessive. The circle impresses upon participants the value and necessity of community involvement in all community matters, including the criminal justice system. I gotta say, I'm reading this and this just makes fucking sense. I genuinely don't understand how anyone could be pissy about this, because this just makes sense. It's just good sense. Continued experience with sentencing circles will, if successful, make community problems obvious to the community and better understood. Community resources will be mobilized to prevent crime, not simply to react to it. In Moses, because the flow of communication followed the natural rhythm of participants' interest, running amongst them rather than along a single current to the judge, something closer to a consensus was achieved. The result was a new recognition of a shared responsibility for the outcome and shared concern for success. An exception to the non-confrontational aspect of sentencing circles is the confrontation of the offender with the pain of the victim, as expressed by the victim and her family or friends. Stuart J. writes that the offender will then have the proper perspective to feel pain herself, and finally to realize the impact of her actions. This may give some motivation for the rehabilitation of the offender. Stuart J. calls the circle a productive way to incorporate victim impact into sentencing, something that rarely happens, implying that it is not always productive in the conventional process. If the sentencing circle allows the offender to better realize what she's done, then one would have to agree the circle itself might in some cases serve as the first stage of the rehabilitative part of the sentence, where the offender faces the context of her actions without any formal barriers to hide behind. A traditional courtroom environment can be degrading and negative, proclaiming the moral inferiority of the offender. Yeah, that's the thing that, yeah. The circle takes positive advantage of the presence of the offender and begins the rehabilitation and the reintegration of the offender into the community. Relative to the conventional process, a more constructive environment is realized. Finally, Stuart J. notes that sentencing circles can serve to provide a meeting of First Nations and Western values. A process that fairly accommodates all value systems must emerge if we're to deal successfully with crime. Now, some concerns. There may be some concern that dramatic altercation of court processes will compromise conventional safeguards of individual rights. Stuart J. considers some of these in Moses. The talking circle tradition includes the tenet that what comes out in a circle stays in a circle. Because the circle theoretically enhances the quality and extent of relevant information, there's more potentially sensitive information. In cases where the reasons for closed circle are compelling, the rationale behind principles of open court might have to be reconsidered. Similarly, more flexible rules might be developed concerning the storage of and public access to transcripts. Reading Moses, one gets the impression that Stuart J. has purposely left out the more personal information that emerged in the circle. The need to solve evidentiary problems need not preclude the use of a circle. Disputed facts arising out of a circle discussions can be proved or disproved in the conventional manner during a break from the circle or by consent of the parties within the circle. The question arises whether facts decided upon within the circle would be subject to appeal. Amendments to the criminal code might be considered whereby full transcripts are allowed to be kept in a sealed packet to be opened only in the event of an appeal, but ultimately to be destroyed. The use of a circle does not eliminate any substantive considerations, and its procedural advantages make it useful to the discovery of sentencing alternatives. Since many such alternatives will require community resources, Stuart J.'s discussion of sentencing considerations in Moses, for example, is conventional. He outlines the proper weight and considerations to be accorded the offender's criminal record and the appropriateness of a jail sentence for both the offense and the offender. The analysis is enhanced by what the judge learns during the circle discussions. The circle was used as a last resort in Moses, where the accused had a considerable history of incarceration. As the process becomes more familiar, courts may become less hesitant to follow a sentencing circle. The circle could become an innovative means of rehabilitation applied to the outset of a person's criminal history. Seeking the support of the community will be more difficult in larger communities, especially where the victim, the offenders, and or the crime is disconnected to an urban area. Community is less easily defined in such a situation, especially when compared to the situation in Moses, where the circuit court was visiting a small, largely Aboriginal community. A relative disadvantage of the circle process might be to the victim, because she must face the offender directly. The victim's assumption of the responsibility to communicate the real harm she suffered will be painful at times, but may help the offender realize the effect of her actions. This communication is complementary to and consistent with the participation of the larger community, the search for truth, what really happened, and what sentencing options might be effective and appropriate, and providing context. The presence of an open-minded judge, Crown, and defense counsel who can see and appreciate the merits of a circle is necessary. The judge will need to be receptive to the suggestion of a circle, especially where the Crown might object to an application for its use, as it did in Moses. A Crown prosecutor who's hostile to the use of a circle will have the strength of established judicial practice on her side. As Stuart J. notes, however, the crowds and judge who do not live in the community, are not familiar with the community, must be cautious in opposing, on the basis of a need to protect the public, a rehabilitative plan developed by the community. It's one of the things that I think is vital to understanding these kinds of sentencing alternatives. We have this ridiculous idea that what's being proposed is that indigenous people shouldn't have to go to jail. And that's not the case. First off, it's very rare that these even get utilized. But second off, it's not about should or shouldn't be punished. It's about how do we fix this problem. This is a big thing to me. There is a world of difference between trying to rehabilitate a person, trying to protect society from a person, trying to punish a person. Those are three very different things. And our judicial system kind of fails at all three. Well, it's pretty good at locking people up, but that's kind of about it. This idea of community involvement and community engagement in creating an applicable sentence that understands where the person is and where they, how to get them to where they need to be, I think is kind of a fully awesome idea. Like that, and that's just that. This is the thing that we don't do communities now. I live in a community. We live in a society. I live in a community, and I don't know any of my neighbors except for the one that when they moved in, it was because I contacted the landlord and said, hey, I have a friend. Other than that, I don't know anyone in my neighborhood. I don't want to know anyone in my neighborhood. I choose to live a very isolated lifestyle from them because they're not my people. And I'm pretty sure that they're not sitting around waiting going, oh, when will the weird looking kid come talk to me? I don't think that's happening. It's part of our breakdown of our society is the isolation. True justice, in my opinion, should be about doing all three of those things. Protecting society, valuing the effect of what was done, and how do we rehabilitate? Now, we can't always rehabilitate. We know that there are certain crimes that, at least to date, we haven't really found a way to deal with chronic recidivism. This is not for those crimes. We're not talking about, someone murdered somebody and as a result they have to live with their family and not drink for a year. Like that's their sentence. That's 100% not what we're talking about. And when we're talking about indigenous communities, we have certain very uncomfortable to white people things that we have to agree and admit. And that is, these are people, hey, Sugar, how you doing? Tansi, good to see you. I'm trying to educate myself on restorative justice, and right now we're looking at sentencing circles, so to bring you up to speed. Now, what I was going to say was, we, the honky folk, have got to get our heads around the fact that we've done the damage. We've caused some problems along the way. And our one-size-fits-all view of the world is great and everything, but you have to look at the material conditions of a person's life. In this case, what we're talking about is an offender who had an alcohol problem, lived in a small tribal reservation in sort of the middle of nowheresville kind of thing, and had been a pain in the ass to his community. This wasn't the community getting this person out of trouble. This was the community saying there's better ways than what we've been doing. What we've been doing is following the standard approach for what the white folk do, and that wasn't working. We had a person who was consistently reoffending, and what the community was essentially saying was, we're not solving this problem. We're stopping it from happening for a brief period, but we're not solving this problem. Let's come together and try and solve this problem. So, the tone of Judge Stewart's description of the sentencing circle indicates his enthusiasm for the process. Again, remember, at the start of this, not enthusiastic. The approach was, we might as well give it a whirl. What the hell? Nothing else is working. So that's kind of cool. Other decisions in which the use of circles are considered are of interest for their consideration of situations where the application of the process might not be appropriate. For example, Judge Grotsky suggests in R.V. Chikinu that an offender must indicate that she is contrite before a circle can be held. This approach is problematic. An offender may not realize the effect of her actions until she's been involved in a circle. Refusal to order a circle in such cases would be a denial of the benefits of the circle to both the community and to the offender. Without the circle, the offender may return from imprisonment without having had the community speak to her, and she to them. The possibility of holding a sentencing circle, even in cases where the offender may be subject to a long term of imprisonment, should be examined more carefully. While Section 737 of the Criminal Code only allows a term of probation to be applied to a jail sentence of 2 years or less, the fact that the success of a sentence is in the best interests of the community might mean that a circle is nevertheless appropriate. A circle might enhance any rehabilitative value of the jail term, or it might produce a sentence that replaces imprisonment altogether. In Chikinu, and again, probably saying that entirely wrong, and I apologize, I'm trying. Grotsky, J, I'm assuming that means Justice Grotsky, suggests that a sentencing circle should not be used for any offense to which 2 years or more of incarceration may attach. This is problematic because it denies the court the opportunity to assess the needs of the offender and the likelihood of success of various sentencing options. If a lengthy prison term is not going to help the offender, the court can exercise its discretion to forge another plan. The circle enables the court to discover the most appropriate plan. In R.V. Moran, Justice Milliken suggests that where the offense occurs in a larger community, members of that community should participate in the circle. While this may be appropriate in some cases, it might encumber the circle unnecessarily. It also raises the question of which community members should participate. If the offense is against another First Nations community member within an urban area, for example, there may be no need for the involvement of members of the outside community. Federal crimes are... tabbing badly. Where am I? Federal crimes are not eligible. Yeah, this is a paper from Dalhousie Journal of Legal Studies from 1994. So we are going back in time here. But I just wanted to sort of get a rundown of what was going on. I do think it's weird that federal crimes are accepted from this process, because that is, they are crimes. They are crimes typically against the community. And the circumstances may very well, benefit. I also really don't understand why anyone would be opposed to this kind of a system. Obviously, it's very sort of indigenous community, First Nations in perspective, and I believe draws from the history of indigenous people. But it turns out us honkies are pretty shitty at all of this, and maybe we should start fucking listening to alternatives being used by other groups, because we're not fucking nailing it. The process is still heavily whitewashed. Oh, yes. All we touch is going to be heavily whitewashed. But conceptually, in my mind, this is a step forward from the perspective of interacting with criminals, particularly repeat offenders. It's not a perfect solution if you have a sociopathic serial killer and you go, well, let's just have a sit down. But that's not what this is for. The federal crime thing, that doesn't, that's weird that they would draw that distinction. Obviously certain federal crimes make sense. Maybe murder is an example of something that we don't want to do this. But even then, there are plenty of people who go up on charges of various related things like manslaughter or second degree murder or whatever, where maybe this would be really, really beneficial as part of the process. But mail fraud is a federal charge. Why wouldn't that relate? You know what I mean? There's a million, and that was just off the top of my head. There's a million federal crimes, and probably some of them would really benefit from something like this. Anyways, in R versus Moran, Justice Milliken suggests that where the offense occurs in a larger community, members of that community should participate in the circle. While this may be appropriate in some cases, it might encumber the circle unnecessarily. It also raises the question of which community members should participate. If the offense is against another First Nations community member within an urban area, for example, there may be no need for involvement of members of the outside community. So that's specifically, I think, talking about if you have two indigenous people, like one is the victim and one is the person who did the victimizing, and maybe they live in a city full of us honkies. Maybe we don't need the honkies. Maybe we need, we can skip the white folk. Real restorative justice is to have the offender make it up to the family of whom they harmed, cut wood, get water work for them till the debt is paid. Yes, and that's something that is clearly touched on in like the definitions of these things, but I don't see a lot of the actual, in the case that we were looking at here, R versus Moses, it was sentencing involved like being home with his family and living an alcohol-free life and things like that, which is probably like I'm not going to argue the community felt that was the right answer, but that reparation type piece is not there, at least from what I've seen in here. So I do think that that's an important aspect of it too, and I guess one could argue. No, I'm not gonna. I was gonna say one could argue, and then I realized that what the fuck do I know about anything? I'm just gonna shut up and keep reading, because that's what I'm good at. There is no guarantee that ideal solutions will emerge from the use of sentencing circles, especially given the short history of their employment. Nevertheless, it is encouraging that at least some judges have found the process useful. The acceptance of the sentencing circle for use in the broader community will require that interested lawyers watch for appropriate cases to arise. Once the process is established, and assuming some successes are reported, there is potential for it to be adopted in the wider system. Potential participants will need to demonstrate not only a high level of commitment to the use of sentencing circles, but also an appreciation for the values that Aboriginal communities exhibit in both talking circles and sentencing circles, namely responsibility, openness, and mutual respect. And as Sugar points out, recompense, which I do think is an important part of the process. And that is the end of that document. Okay, so we have an example there. I was looking for an example. This was R.V. Moses, and that was interesting. Obviously, it's a dated article because it is from 1994, from the Dalhousie Journal of Legal Studies, Volume 3, 1994. If the crime is malicious and severe, we just turn our backs on them, and Newbury say the name. I'm assuming that's never say their name again, and they have to leave, which usually means they would die. That's that would be never. That would be a hell of a thing, especially poignant in the delivery of that from a circle like that, where the people who are in the circle, who are your community, essentially get to that place and say, you know what, homeboy, we're done here. You're dead to us. And traditionally, that would be, getting cast out means you're fucked. I live here on the Alberta prairies. Getting cast out by my family, we called that turning 18 when I was a young lad, because it was a different situation. The society didn't shun me. I was simply like, okay, it's time to move out and get my own place, get some, all that kind of stuff. This is obviously a very different monster when you're talking about a smaller community and not in the heart of a large urban industrialized spot, and all of a sudden your entire universe turns your back on you. I could imagine that's a very real deterrent, right? We talk about deterrence in sentencing all the time. That one's got some legs. I like that. I feel like we keep doing this thing where we assume that we got stuff right. We look at the history of honky justice, Western justice, whatever you want to call it, and we just assume that it's correct, and we assume that it works because it works a lot of the time. a goodly chunk of the time. But a lot of the time it doesn't work a goodly chunk of that time. And where it doesn't work, we should be looking for, what are the alternatives? What can we do better? Because we're not doing it. We're not nailing it right now. We got room to improve. And I know it goes against all things honkatudinal, but maybe we need to listen to people who have different experiences than our own, because turns out when you only hear one side of the story, you never really understand that there's other perspectives. There was a guy that is a friend of a friend who was doing his, I believe he was doing his MBA, and his master's thesis was about the effect of someone who is a contrarian on boards of directors. Now, obviously, this is somewhat unrelated, but essentially, every company that has a board of directors where there's at least one person who will stand up to the CEO or the chairman of the board or whoever it is that sort of holds that power and say no and challenge them on their decisions. Every single one of those companies, the CEO's duration at the company is longer, the company does better, and the company lasts longer. When you have a CEO, no matter how brilliant they may believe themselves to be, and they surround themselves with the yes man trope, those companies don't do well. The CEOs don't last as long. And it's because when you are forced to challenge your perspective and look at things from a different perspective because someone says no, or someone says, presents you with an alternative, if you listen, even if you're still right, even if you're 100% right, you have to prove that you're right. You have to know that you're right. And you have to be able to stand by the conviction that you've come up with. If no one challenges you, you're just right, because you're right by virtue of you were right. White people say not to embarrass or shame. Shame is a pretty good tool to encourage proper behavior. I agree. It's one of those ways that our current perspective is odd. I do believe that there's negative shame. I do believe that people are way too quick to shame for way too small a reason. And that probably is one of the reasons why shaming works so well. Because if you don't use it all the time, like you got like the mother-in-law who you wake up in the morning, you put your sandals or your slippers on the wrong foot, and she's right there going like, you fucking idiot. Look at you. You can't even put your shoes on right. Look at you, you stupid. Like, that doesn't help anyone. That crushes people's spirits. But using shame, using it effectively is, I think, vital. I think it's important. I think shame is an important human emotion. It's much like when I went to my counselor, therapist years ago and said, how do I not feel jealousy? And their response was, try not being human. Because jealousy is an important human experience. Knowing how to manage jealousy, knowing how to not be consumed by jealousy, now thereby hangs the tale. Right? Same with shame. Shame has its place. Shaming personal choices doesn't affect anyone else, that don't affect anyone else is stupid. Yeah, and oh man, do we ever love doing that right now. I'm looking at you, Culture War. Yeah, we're super good at shaming people for things they're doing that don't hurt anyone. And like, our legal system, there's a huge amount of chunks of our legal system devoted specifically to treating people like shit for simply living their life in a way that's different. The whole drug war thing. If you look at drugs and you really look at what we understand about drug addiction and drug use and why people, go down those roads and stuff, like, it is so not regular that it's like, someone who was just born bad and they wanted to be a badass, so they took the drugs. A lot of the time, people are getting there for a myriad of reasons, and it's fucking problematic. And then we go, oh, they're just a druggie. They're just a drunk. They're just a whatever the fuck. And sorry, but that is not helping us. That is not working. Being houseless is a crime. Yeah, like, what a fucking stupid crime. You don't own a house? You don't have a house you can rent? Well, you're a criminal. Well, what's that? You don't have any money in your pocket? You vile scumfuck. What kind of fucking ridiculous shit is that? Being poor is actually illegal. Like, if you get poor enough. Loitering is a poor people crime. Yep, loitering is a poor people crime. Asking people for help on the street when you're down on your luck is a crime. That seems fucking weird. It's mind-boggling. And meanwhile, like, we look at, like, petty theft. Petty theft is a crime. You hear people talk about what's happening in the U.S. right now. A buddy of mine lives in just in a small town in California, and in that small town, there has been some kind of a law that I don't understand at all that says that you can shoplift under a certain amount of money. Let's fucking look this up. Let's look this up, because this one pisses me off because I don't know. It doesn't sound right. So let's just go California shoplifting $950. There's a first thing that comes up is fact checking. So that's not a good look. So Prop 47, no, you can't steal up to $950 worth of merchandise in California without consequences under Prop 47. Prop 47 reclassified the theft offenses from felonies to misdemeanors, including shoplifting. It doesn't mean people can steal up to $950 in good without consequences. Prop 47, a law enacted in California, has been brought back into the public eye, blah, blah, blah. Fox News. Reduces the penalties for some nonviolent drug and petty theft offenses. Since some Republican lawmakers in California are now pushing for a bill to repeal Prop 47, while other lawmakers are looking to amend it. A recent poll found that most voters surveyed would support changes to Prop 47. We're proposing a pretty radical idea. Make crime illegal in California. Assemblyman Kevin Kiley, big shocker, the Republican who appeared on Fox News in support of the bill to repeal Proposition 47, wrote in a tweet. So essentially, what they've done is it's a misdemeanor instead of a crime. That's like sensible. You know, if people are shoplifting, there's probably a reason for it. Rich people probably aren't shoplifting in higher numbers, right? That's just a thing that's happening. Poor people probably more likely to shop. And then you go, yeah, but they're not stealing food. They're not stealing food, clothing, and shelter. They're stealing an Xbox. You know why? Because you can sell a fucking Xbox and buy a lot of food, clothing, and shelter. It's a thing. So my buddy lives down in California, and he had to go into the big city for a shopping spree, picking up some important stuff. And literally in front of him, some kids ran up to this sunglass hut and smashed the fuck out of it, stole all the stuff. The person's crying and terrified, and they left the mall, and then they hopped in a car and they drove ridiculously. It was a stolen car, and they drove ridiculously recklessly through the parking lot to get out. And apparently that's a thing in I don't know if it's a California thing or whatever, or if I'm talking out of my ass, but it's a thing where you go do a crime, you steal a car, and then you drive like a crazy person because you don't want people getting out of the fucking mall. You don't want them coming near your vehicle where they might, I don't know, get a license plate number or whatever, and you don't want them to try and stop you. So you drive recklessly and scare them the fuck away. I get that. I'm not saying it's like, oh yeah, that's super good, but I get it. Certain things should always be available and free. People have the right to move freely in Canada. Why aren't there bicycles that anyone can just use? 100% agree. That blew my mind when I was in Amsterdam many years ago. There's bikes, and you could just grab a bike and take a bike, and I was like, but they're gonna, people are gonna steal those. And to which the obvious answer is, why? who's going to buy a stolen bike if there's, you know, you can just walk up and grab one and ride it without any problems? Like, what? And that boggled my noodle. It was so weird to me. If I see someone taking food, no, I didn't. Yeah, fuck that. If I see someone taking food, I'm not saying a goddamn thing. Honestly, if I see someone stealing a car, I'm not saying a goddamn thing. It's the reasons behind why people are doing their things, I can't know in that moment. I'm not there to judge. I'm not going to be calling the police going, there's a sinister looking person. They are in my neighborhood, and I think that they're, you know, like, if it's my car, yeah, I'll call the cops. If I, you know, not that I drive a car, nor would I actually call the cops, because fuck cops. But you know what I mean? Like, I would understand someone reacting in that way if their car was being stolen, because it's like, hey, that's my fucking car, motherfucker. But so, it's a fucking car. Yeah, they're expensive, but it's insured. If you don't have theft insurance, maybe you should have had theft insurance. That person who's using that car, if they're joyriding, well, maybe fuck that kid. But if they're stealing your car and they're taking it to a chop shop, maybe they needed it. I don't know. It feels really, really unnecessary to go after people for shit like that. People stealing food, fucking eat. You know, the concept of that frustrates the shit out of me. If I was in, like, I go to the Safeway near my house to buy groceries, and they regularly have people stealing food there. And if I ever saw someone stealing food there, as Sugar says, no, I didn't. I didn't see nothing. Some motherfucker wants to eat, I'm not going to get in the way of that shit. You know, if you're stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from your employees' wages, yeah, that's a problem. But if you're stealing $25 worth of food so you and a couple of people you know can survive, okay. How about you? I don't really care if people steal. I don't care if they steal my stuff. They needed it more. Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, there are certain things that I am protective of in my life. Largely because, you know, I have invested my own mental shit into them. My musical instruments, for example, I wouldn't want someone to steal them from me. But if someone did steal them from me, that sucks. I would probably have to call the cops, just on virtue of, you know, if I want to do an insurance claim, I have to have some kind of, I have reported this to the police. But the cops aren't gonna fucking look. They're not gonna do a goddamn thing. They're not casing out fucking pawn shops looking for stolen stuff. You can fucking forget that. And I recognize that the things that are important enough to me to worry about are things that I've chosen to insure. They're things that, you know, that's all in my head that they're important to me. Other than that, like, if someone came in and stole my TV right now, well, I guess I don't have a TV. If someone stole my computer, it would annoy me. But I can buy another computer. I'm lucky enough to be in a situation where I can buy another computer. And that's not going to kill me. And I don't really, you know, it's a fucking TV. I can buy another computer, TV, all of that. You know, oh no, I couldn't work from home. Well, then I would go to my office and they would give me another computer. Specifically for, you know, working on. It wouldn't be a personal computer. It would just be like a laptop of theirs with their build and all that shit on. Like, who cares? It's not stopping me. There's a video of a woman with 4 kids by different dads. One of the dads brings food only for his kid. And the comments are crazy. People are fine with that one kid eating and the other 3 going hungry because the other kids aren't his responsibility. What kind of human wretches watches kids go hungry? Monsters. I don't think that we're talking about humans there, love. I think that's clearly monsters. When we were kids, you know, I don't know about anyone else, but in my experience, like, if there was a kid in your class that went to school and he didn't have a lunch, you know, no one was like, okay, let's take up a collection for old Johnny. You would just, instinctively be like, well, do you want to have some of my pudding? You can have half of my sandwich. My mom gave me snackables and I don't like them, or, like whatever. That kind of shit happens all the time. As we get older, we stop doing that. Happy Canada Day. Hey, I am Canadian. Hey, buddy, how you doing? I don't know about Happy Canada Day. I struggle with this one. Canada Day is, I do love Canada. These are facts. It is a country where I can live a pretty decent life. I can have pretty decent opportunities. It ain't perfect. It's far from perfect. It's got a lot of blood on its hands, as I think all countries do. But being proud of being Canadian is a little difficult. I said at the start of the thing, I was like, we're on stolen land. We did a genocide or two along the way. It's kind of hard to be proud of that. I'm happy to live here. I'm happy to be a productive part of living here and to, have conversations about the fact that we did a genocide or two along the way. But like me going downtown with a Canada flag, which these days, honestly, every time I see a Canada flag, I feel like, and I feel like that's like my enemy when I see someone with a Canada flag. Not because I'm, hate Canada, but because the fucking fuck Trudeau people have been just so ever present. It's just, just as happy, less red. Rhombus recognizes Earth as our species home. Exactly. Rhombus is no. I'm gonna throw some rhombuses in chat just for shits and giggles because I'm the only one that can. I clicked the wrong thing though. That's not gonna be the thing I need. I'm gonna click there. I got rhombus emojis ever since I became affiliate. Rhombus. There we go. Rhombus is coming at you as soon as I hit enter in the right spot. Happy Earth in particular in this particular location day. Yeah, that works. Nationalism is absolutely fucking weird. I've never really had a thing about nationalism that it doesn't make sense. Nothing should be uncritically loved. I will even put, we talk about unconditional love for like children and stuff. I think there should be conditions. And I don't mean that in a shitty, gross, evil way. I mean like no one gets a get out of jail free card. You have to try and be a decent human being. My one of my kids went through a phase where she was not awesome. And being in her life at that time was dangerous for me, and not only dangerous, but like it came with no end of pain and no amount of pleasure. And so I said, like, I love you, I still love you always, but I'm done until things change. So I guess that's not unconditional love being revoked. So maybe I do believe in unconditional love. But you know what I mean? Like that sense of something gets the get out of jail free card, right? My country, 'tis of thee. Thank God I'm gonna go, love my country some more. Like, cool, love your fucking country. That's weird. Countries are dumb. Borders are stupid. Indigenous to this planet, but we don't act that way. And then we have a link. I love all my kids. One of them I don't like very much all the time. Exactly. And that's, I think, normal. All right, I'm going to pop open this link that you sent. I am Canadian. I believe this is the pale blue dot. I could be wrong. Let's find out. As long as it's not like... Ew. What am I looking at? Oh, not ew. Okay, now I see what I'm looking at. Okay, let me pop it open. For a second there, it did not register properly. So it says, Canada, take back your flag. And it is a decal that says Canada, has the Canadian flag crushing the Freedom Convoy. And that, motherfuckers, is perfectly good. Freedom Convoy. Yeah, they're back at it. Fucking up Ottawa. My oldest son is a jerk sometimes. Yeah, I think I've hit a point where my kids are less commonly jerks and more likely to just be, pickles a little bit. But there's not malice or anything like that. They're doing all right. Hopefully it stays that way. But kids are kids. Sometimes they're going to piss you off, and you're not required to be. My dad used to always say, "I love you. I just don't really like you right now." And I hated hearing that because I knew it was true, and I knew I caused it, and done that just suck. Bear's a joy. Yeah, I've not met Bear, but I've seen videos of Bear, and I've heard, read much of the conversations you and Bear have that you share, and Bear seems pretty fucking rad. Fuck the convoy. Yeah, I can share that sentiment. I'm not really huge on the convoy, largely because they're shitty fascists, and I've never really been a big fan of shitty fascists. What does this say? Oh, it's just a hang on. Oh shit, I'm doing things. I'm gonna pop over so y'all can see what I Am Canadian sent. It's a tree, or no, it's a light post. And can I zoom in, please, please, oh please, please, pretty please. And there's a sticker on it that says "Fuck the convoy," and it's the Parliament building, and there's a drawing that looks like a middle finger hand. And it's done. That's an American middle finger hand too, right? That's one of those awkward, like, what the fuck do they do? They look like, bear claw. This is the middle finger. This shit is like some weird, like, hand knitting thing. Americans, I don't get it. Tamara Leach got arrested again in Medicine Hat. Yes, I heard about that. And apparently Medicine Hat is very upset about this. Or at least, the hogs in Medicine Hat are very upset about this. Which makes sense because, fuck those people, and that's what they're going to do. But, she's awful. I don't know how anyone would be like, there's a person I should defend. All right, I'm going to pee, and I'm going to go outside for 5-ish minutes, get that sun on my face that I enjoy so much. I have a new setup, so I've been dicking around with it today. I think everything is good. I got a whole different mic that I'm using. It's going through my digital interface, which is what I use when I record music on my computer. It was a bit of a sticky wicket, so I don't know if my volumes are all too loud or not. So let me know if my voice is too loud, if my voice is too quiet. Also, I'm gonna play the cheeseball music. I can't even hear this, which is fine. I don't need to hear this. It's actually coming out of a whole different set of headphones because that's the world. But I know it's playing, and I don't know if it's too loud or not. All right, I will return momentarily. I'm gonna mute my mic too, because Okay, I'm back. Let me stop that music. And hey, I'm back and stuff. Did you miss me? I don't know if they let her out yet. She was hoping she'd be in there for the whole weekend. I would hope that she spends the rest of her life rotting in jail. I would 100% be okay with that. You know, monster people deserve monster results. That's the facts. And it bugs me how little people seem to get that. You know, she's bad. She's bad. The like in the CPC leadership run, they were literally arguing over like which I supported the protesters. No, I supported the protesters. No, you're a fucking piece of shit. Those people are criminals and deserve to be stopped. That's just facts. Not a big fascism guy. Weird, I know. I had this thought the other day that kind of relates to that, and it was, you know, right now, it's like we're on the Titanic, and we're too busy writing apps to book a chair. Like, that's the world we're in right now. We're writing apps to book a chair on the Titanic, so that you can sit while the whole thing fucking falls. Yeah, but she's a white lady. They don't really stay in jail. They really don't. I mean, Dorothy Jodry spent 6 months for shooting her husband. Like, facts. I'm drinking this lovely, it's called Old Beautiful Brass Monkey. It's a blood orange blonde. And it is very lovely, and I'm enjoying it. Yeah, there's something about that, you know? White women, unless they're like poor, which I think Tamara Leach is, or was before all that GoFundMe business. Oh, it is fancy. I'm a fancy lad. What can I say? But there's like the good poors and the bad poors in the legal system. There's the good poors that are the ones that are like, you know, Tamara Leach. And then there's the bad ones that are like, you know, struggling in life and non-fascist. So it's you know, it's a mixed bag. If you're gonna do crimes, you'd best first get a white body with vagina. White men go to jail more than white women, but I still feel like we get a whole lot of scot-free in the equation. You gotta fuck up to go to jail. And then you know, as soon as you evade the spectrum of white, I wonder how white trans people do. That's an interesting question. I don't imagine there's enough like data to really say whether white trans people have a easier or harder time with the judicial system. I would know where I'm gonna put my guess. It would be on way fucking worse, but I don't know. I'm gonna quickly open my blinds because I feel like I'm a little too dark. One sec. That feels a bit better. Yeah. Look at me all shiny and new, like a virgin. Touched for the very first time. Yeah. It's a neat world we live in. We don't have laws that specifically use racial terms, so therefore there's no such thing as systemic racism because systemic only means laws. Didoy. It's still a crime to be trans and poor. Yeah. If you're pretty much if you're anything other than you know, the small handful of acceptable good peoples, then you should probably just, you know, live in a place where there's not a place for you to live ever. I don't know. I feel shiny now. I feel like the sun is reflecting off of my oily face or something. I don't know. Whatever. I didn't even think to shower before today. I woke up. I forgot to turn my alarms off, even though I had a day off today, to celebrate our glorious nation and all she does for us. And then then I didn't turn my alarms off, so I still woke up at 5:30 the fucking morning and was like, fuck, now I'm awake. And I kept thinking about like, oh yeah, I got to do all this cool shit today. I'm gonna go online. I'm gonna stream for a bit. I'm gonna work on. I'm gonna try and write a polyrhythm on drums. I don't play drums, but I have a computer where I can program drums. And a polyrhythm, allow me to explain. A polyrhythm is where you are playing. Let's just say that a section of music is written in 4/4 time. But you are playing measures that are measured in 11/4 time or 11/8 time. This would be the example from our song 11Z's Bodies of Ever song. So it's off, and it doesn't. If everyone's playing at 11/8 time, then it's at 11/8 time. But the section I'm referring to, the drums are still playing in 4/4. It's just everything else goes to 11/8, and it goes out of sync and then comes back into sync, which is kind of cool. So I have never written a polyrhythm because I'm not very smart. But there is a song that I wrote. I stole a little guitar clip that Reno had put together, and I wrote a rough song around like this piece getting pasted in a couple of times, and it had guitar and drums. But it was literally just like 20 seconds of music, and I turned it into a 4-minute song with all these different parts. So essentially I took his piece, pasted it where it felt right, and then I had drums that I programmed, and I had my bass that I recorded to give the structure of the song. And there's one section in particular where I think a polyrhythm is probably something that I need to do in order to give the song a little bit more chutzpah. So I'm going to do that. But yeah, all these things in my head, never bothered having a shower. So, oily skin. Don't judge me. Rain and thunder and hail. We were joking that it was a cleansing. Do we get to hear? Do you get to hear the song? I can play you. It's part of 11Z's shows a polyrhythm if you want. Yeah, I can. I mean, I can play you. I'll play you what I got, what I came up with. There's additional stuff that happened. Ooh, thunder. Where is this? So it's under here. The song is called "It Ends," and yes, one sec. Oh, I might just go missing for a moment. I'm curious. Now, is it still gonna pick up my audio? It looks like it is. It's still getting that, but if I press play, you won't hear it, which I can prove pretty easily by pressing play. I'm going to, where are the parts? So I need the 6 violins. I don't need structure. I need clean bass. Is fuzzy bass necessary? Do I have a single bass line? No, I don't. And I'm gonna not mute contact. Is that everything I need? Yes, I think that will work. Okay, so you'll know the difference between the stuff that I wrote and the stuff that got written. And I can't hear it because it's coming out of these headphones, and there's nothing coming out, which means I need to quickly do a thing. It'll take moments. I go click on there, and I say add new hardware output, reroute 1 and reroute 2, close. And now if I play, oh, it's making noise. Okay. So this is the part that I was talking about with the word, or the guitar part. Can you get electrocuted by lightning in the shower? I don't know. I've always been told you could, but I've never been electrocuted by lightning in the shower, so I think it might be a bullshit. I told my son that he can't because copper is conductive. I don't even know if I was lying. I don't know. I legitimately don't know. So this is me just doing stuff. The drums are in basic 4/4, and it's just like do 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 do. If I threw a polyrhythm in this section, I think it'd be a cooler experience. So that's kind of the vibe. And there is another guitar part that has already been written for this. But yeah, I don't have it. So then we're back to the beginning part. Do I have a Reaper view here? You can see Reaper. No, but I have random window. And I can say to that one, let's look at... Oh, but it doesn't have all the shit that I need. So we're not going to do that. Sorry. You like it? Oh, thank you very much. It's a little basic, but once we get other instruments, do that little polyrhythm section, it'll be more interesting. That is the song. And it's probably set to loop, isn't it? Yep. Okay. Stopped ahead of time. All right, yeah, that's the song. I'm gonna do a cool little polyrhythmic section on that, and it will be way cooler as a result. And yeah, where am I going? I have to go to... I'm just making sure that I have my backdrop garbage music ready if I should go for another dart. And I need to also do the thing where I tell it to use the reroutes. One sec, sorry. I know this is super exciting, especially since you can't see what I'm doing. All right. There we go. Okay, we are prepared. Should the need arise. Yeah. Oh, you're very welcome. It was. It's fun to share that kind of stuff. I've always been like an okay mid-level bass player, and I still am in a lot of ways. But my skill level has improved, and that's kind of fun. And it's been a whole bunch of fun to explore, especially with this band, Bodies of Everest. Dr. James Reddy has also been a bunch of fun because it was when I started in the band, I was way over my head, but it's more straightforward, like ska, lots of walking, lots of like, but it's all 4/4 time and everything. Whereas Bodies is all over the map. You know, our song 11sies is called that because it's in 11/8 time, and then it has that polyrhythm section where it's in 4/4, but we're playing 11/8, except the drums are in 4/4. And as a guy who plays music, when you're a rhythm section guy and suddenly you're no longer in line with the drummer, boy, do you notice. Boy, oh boy. But you get through it, and then you're like, oh, this was badass. I'm winning at playing music. Look at me go. I really enjoy the whole process. Anyways. I want to see, there was another document that I saw when I was considering the whole conversation today. I want to see if I can find this document. Where was it? It was a PDF. On restorative justice. Let me see if I can find it. I think this was it. Yeah. Let me pop over to that view so you can see what I'm talking about. That's a good old-fashioned PDF file. I wonder... Yeah, so a report on relationship between restorative justice and indigenous legal traditions in Canada. This is done by Larry Chartrand, who has a bunch of letters after his name. He's a full professor at the University of Ottawa, and Canucklehead Horn, a PhD candidate from the University of Ontario, prepared for the Department of Justice Canada. This is 2016, so it's a little more relevant and recent than what we were looking at before. I don't want to read the executive outline. So, restorative justice, principles and processes. Although there is no universal definition of restorative justice, it can generally be understood as an approach to crime and conflict that brings the victim... Hang on, I'm going to see if I can embiggen that a bit. Yeah, that works. Is that easier for you guys to read? That brings the victim, the offender, members of the larger community, and sometimes professional service providers together into a non-hierarchical setting in order to collectively address a harm that was committed and set a path towards reconciliation between all relevant parties. Cameron, 2005, Millward, Ward, 2008. Drawing on notions of human interrelatedness, restorative justice sees crime and conflict as a breakdown of interpersonal relationships. Therefore, restorative justice processes are supposed to restore, repair, and heal those relationships through meaningful and democratic input from all parties involved. These processes are meant to produce a sense of responsibility in the offender after they've heard how their actions and behavior have affected the victim and the larger community. This, in turn, is supposed to initiate a desire within the offender, but also within the victim and community, to begin the tough work of healing and restoring relationships and rebuilding the community to begin the... I just popped up lines. And rebuilding the community's well-being. Restorative processes are not meant to restore interpersonal relationships to where they were before the conflict took place. Rather, restorative justice processes should be seen as forward, future-looking, in the sense that they try to bring individuals understood as relational human beings into a position where they are capable of entering into equal and healthy interpersonal relationships again without relying on criminal justice sanctions. Am I familiar with the Gladue process? I am not. Let's take a look at that, shall we? Because I do not know what that is. I'm going to copy and paste. Is that Gladue? Am I saying that? Probably way wrong. Okay, new tab, paste. All right, what do we got? Key factors relevant to Aboriginal sentencing considerations. Canadian sentencing laws recognize that some categories of people in society are different than others. Section 718.2e of the Criminal Code addresses Aboriginal sentencing. The section requires the sentencing judge to pay particular attention to the circumstances of Aboriginal offenders and to consider all available sanctions other than imprisonment that are reasonable in the circumstances. An individual Aboriginal status is considered in determining a sentence because his or her circumstances are different from non-Aboriginal offenders. One reason why the Criminal Code treats Aboriginal people uniquely is because Aboriginal people are overrepresented in Canadian prisons. Gasp. To deal with the overrepresentation of Aboriginal people in prison, Section 718.2e directs judges to undertake the sentencing of Aboriginal offenders differently. First, the sentencing judge should consider the unique systemic or background factors which may have played a part in bringing the particular Aboriginal offender before the courts. Some of these background factors include low incomes, high unemployment, lack of opportunities, lack of irrelevance of education, substance abuse, loneliness, and community fragmentation that leads Aboriginals to have a higher incidence of crime and incarceration. Interesting how we don't say anything about the fact that a lot of those things are directly the result of the impact of the honky folk. How weird. For the crime of being poor and indigenous, we sentence you to dun dun dun. Yes. Systemic factors include the widespread discrimination that Aboriginals experience both in and outside penal institutions. Is Aboriginals still okay for me to say? Not from a TOS perspective or whatever, but I mostly see them referred to as indigenous people, and I don't want to be saying the wrong stuff. Poverty is a self-made crime. Get a job, right? Hippies. Second, the judge should consider the types of sentencing procedures and sanctions which may be appropriate in the circumstances for the offender because of his or her particular Aboriginal heritage or connection. This is because the traditional sentencing ideals of deterrence, separation, and denunciation do not accord with the understanding of sentencing held by Aboriginal offenders in their community. Most traditional Aboriginal conceptions of sentencing place a primary emphasis upon the ideals of restorative justice, an approach to remedying crime in which it is understood that all the things are interrelated and that crime disrupts the harmony which existed prior to a crime's occurrence. Restorative justice determines a particular sanction by considering the needs of the victims and the community as well as the offender. An example of this can be seen in circle sentencing, which is the thing that we read earlier. Oop, shit, pushing buttons. In this sense, the community participates in resolving the conflict. Those involved sit in a circle to break down the formality that can characterize a classroom sentencing hearing. An emphasis is placed on healing and consensus building among all those who are affected by the crime. Supreme Court of Canada stated Section 718.2e is more than simply a reaffirmation of existing sentencing principle, but in fact gives direction to sentencing judges to undertake the process of sentencing Aboriginal offenders differently in order to endeavor to achieve a truly fit for purpose. I work too much. To achieve a truly fit and proper sentencing in the particular case. Key, as the court noted, sentencing judges still must match the offense and the offender and give a fit sentence. Therefore, remember the method of analysis done by the sentencing judge is different for the Aboriginal offenders. Indigenous is preferred, but no one is going to freak out if you say Aboriginal. Okay, cool. It's not even about freaking out. I just don't want to say something that has some context that I don't understand that could hurt feelings. I just think that's a legit thing. Why are you poor? A, you're lazy. B, you're a godless heathen. C, you didn't vote conservative, therefore you don't count. All of the above. All of the above. In order to not be poor, 1, work hard, get a job. 2, be Christian. 3, vote conservative. If you don't vote conservative, don't you know the filthy liberals will come along and tax all of your money, and they'll eat your babies, and they'll make you a godless heathen, and they'll bring about communism, which is, of course, a kind of Marxist, despicable, vagrant kind of philosophy that leads to people being vile and disgusting. And then when they are vile and disgusting, we have only one solution, and that is obviously to eradicate. Yes, it is good. It is good. Welcome to Canada. Join the Freedom Convoy. It is very good. Send your children to the nearest priest for their spiritual care. Yes, the priest laid his hands on me, Father. They'll learn many, many things. And that's the beauty of religion. You know, it's not just about Christ dying on the cross. It's also about kitty diddling. You enjoy my accents. I have to be so careful with accents. And I'm not saying that in like a, goddamn woke way, but like, I'm on the wrong view. You can't see the full beauty of my face. I have to be so careful because accents are one of those things that I'm really good at. And that when I was growing up were hilarious. No one ever would have thought, like, you could do an accent in a way that was derogatory and degrading and stuff, but I never did. I was always like, I just love the sound of different people's accents and stuff. And that was wrong. And I had this realization because I was working at the bar I used to work at, and I made a gay joke, and I used a very, very gay voice, and that's one that still pops out of my mouth without even second thought happening. And so I struggle with that one. But I made it was just like, a couple of friends, and we're chatting, and somebody said something, and like, that's what she said, kind of, ha, 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 ha. And yeah, it was, as soon as I said it, I was like, my kids are gay. Whether I mean it or not, and whether there's any malice or not, like, I'm making my kids the butt of this joke. That's not all right. I need to fucking change how I'm doing stuff. And that has led me on a path to not use accent as much. But I do enjoy them, but I try to mostly use, ones that are less offensive, like, the filthy Germans or evil Southern Baptists. Oh, we have a link. A TikTok link. Well, all right. Go tiki-taki. I have a TikTok account, and I haven't even been on TikTok. I probably have you have 800 notifications, because I just don't care. All right.
Okay, ask me that question again.
Hey, it's Bear.
Okay, well, now it just seems really. I mean, yeah, it is moral. What would happen if you? What kind of punishment would you get from a judge if you were to steal church donations?
You would probably have to suck a moist, pink, uncircumcised priest's wet ball dink. And his balls would touch your chin because it's real short.
That there was some fine quality entertainment. I enjoyed that quite a bit. I think if you steal from the church, they treat it the same as stealing, but they hate you more. So this is cool. 1-907-312-8 or 5085. Anyone can text their city, region, and province, state, country to this handy number, i.e., arriving at an unfamiliar city for a meeting and wanting to prepare a land acknowledgement. It also works with zip code. Oh, that's very cool. That is very cool with land acknowledgements and stuff. Yeah, that's super awesome. The land acknowledgement thing is so my kid graduated this year, and they had a land acknowledgement, and there was a white student and an indigenous student who gave the land acknowledgement, and the white kid was everything you can imagine. They were both girls, and the white one was that obviously she was a keen, probably part of the GSA and part of all sorts of student clubs that were very welcoming and affirming, and a very confident young person who's probably going to go into a career in management of some kind. And the indigenous girl was obviously also equally awesome, but terrified as fuck. And I don't think has ever had a lot of experience with speaking in front of a crowd. And it was surreal to see the difference. Not it wasn't a race thing or anything like that, but the difference between these two people. One of whom was confident and was yes, we are currently on this land, and this is the thing. And then they go to the other person, and they would talk and I'm very happy to be. And it was just. It made me think of how genuinely lucky I am that I'm a blabbermouth. Example: if you text Calgary, Alberta to it, in Calgary, Alberta, you are on Canucklehead. I'm probably saying that wrong. Kamaxis, Michif Paye, Métis. I can't pronounce these words properly, and I don't want to do it wrong. And Satina. Yes, that is very cool. And then it'll give you the link to it'll give you the how to do the land acknowledgement. That's super cool. I hope that comes with pronunciation, because that's one of the areas where I, a honky, fail miserably. I know the names of the reservations that are Nitsetapi. Okay. Thank you, sugar. I, a honky, do not have a sense for how to properly say a lot of the words. I believe it's Siksika and Sutana. I could be saying those wrong, but when I look at a land acknowledgement and there's other stuff on there, and I'm like, and ultimately it's because I don't want to say things wrong and then be that stupid guy that sucks. I said those two right, but if it's Picani, I think, is another one that's but I'm certain I'm saying that wrong. And yeah, but land acknowledgements are fantastic. They're just a small thing that you can do to just keep that whole concept in your head of reconciliation, and that we are on unceded land. It's Treaty 7 is technically ceded land in the sense that they signed a contract that says that, you know, we were going to take the land, but it's entirely arguable that no, they didn't know what they were fucking signing off on, and that's just bullshit. I set them right. Oh, look at me. I'm a fucking I'm a champion. I keep seeing links to how to speak Blackfoot courses, and I keep thinking, like, maybe I got to do that. Yeah, treaties are rental agreements. Not only are treaties rental agreements, any legally binding contract is only fair if it is entered into, you know, with two people fully consenting, fully agreeing on the terms and conditions, and understanding the terms and conditions and how they are being laid out. So if you have a language breakdown, which we did in Treaty 7, you know, you're going through multiple parties to translate. Things get lost in translation. And yeah, so the treaty says, yep, land's all yours, cool. But I'm fairly certain that, and the elders that I have seen speak on the subject all say, we didn't know we were giving away our land. We wouldn't have given away our land. We thought we were, like, being upfront and sharesies with you guys, and then you came in and were like, no sharesies, no takesy backsies, you signed. Ciao for now. Oh, take care, my friend. I am Canadian. Always a pleasure to have you in the chat. I hope you're doing well, and have a good rest of your Dia de la Canadia. Starting to get warm. I better finish it. That is lovely. And it is fancy. That's all gone. What'll I do? I have an idea. Drink another one. I want to go back to that PDF that we were just reading. And I just want to sort of blurb through a bit and see if there's anything more that we can find in there that will give us a different perspective or whatever. Because right now we're talking about this might be actually interesting. In practice, restorative programs across Canada are fairly pragmatic. I thought it said problematic, and I was like, oh, they're going to talk about some challenges that the system has to face or whatever. But no, that's not what I'm looking for. Let's go down. This is like a 17-page long thing. Oh, that's interesting. Family group conferencing is based upon the Maori and Samoan tradition of involving extended family in resolving conflicts. It's been adopted as the primary means of dealing with young offenders in New Zealand. In Canada, the mediators or facilitators assist accused persons and their families to meet with victims, police, and others to discuss and resolve the incident. Most initiatives have focused on young offenders, but some communities are using the model with youth and adults in a process that is called community justice conferencing. Okay, so I think we can jump past. Various restorative justice programs mentioned above exist largely as policy initiatives, although they have solid foundations in law. Section 718.2e in the Criminal Code says all available sanctions other than imprisonment that are reasonable shall be considered for offenders, with specific attention being paid to Aboriginal offenders. Now, this is exactly the kind of thing that makes the Conservatives get dick hard. They see the words especially, specific attention being paid to Aboriginal offenders, and they go, oh yeah, there's systemic racism, all right. See, right there, it says right there, it says that Aboriginals get to not ever go to jail. That's because those people are shitfucks. That isn't at all what the purpose and the intent behind that is. The fact is, our system has criminalized being indigenous. Indigenous people make up a gigantic proportion of the prison population, and not a similar proportion of the actual population of the country. So that leads us to one of two possible answers. Number one, well, they're just all bad. That's not the answer. That's a bad answer, a stupid answer, and one that isn't borne out by looking at actual facts. Number two, the other option, is maybe there is systemic discrimination at play that leads to higher sentencing of people who are indigenous. I Can't imagine how that could possibly be the case. A wink. But it is. Yeah. So we specifically recognize this fact, and we wrote into our law to say, consider, while we're considering these other options, do so particularly in the event of dealing with indigenous people, because they're getting the shit end of the stick here, and it's kind of our fault. Not taking into account that in their system there are no indigenous kids that do adult time for being beat up by cops. Oh, sorry, I missed the point there. I might send Pear to get me some booze. Hey, something just happened. What just happened? I don't know. What just happened? I see. I can't say that either. Someone has just followed me, and it disappeared before I could even get a moment. I want to say thank you. So give me 1 second, and I will look at my recent events. iPub Akalawa, I guarantee you I said that entirely wrong, has followed. Thank you for the follow. I'm sorry that I'm so very, very bad at saying words. And is my alert box not showing up on here? I don't think it is. Where's the alert box? Is gone on this. Okay, I can fix that. 1 sec. Thank you for the follow. I am a very, very tiny streaming Andy. And I just recently made affiliate, which is pretty keno bino in my opinion. I think that's pretty niftaroo, and so it's cool that you gave me a follow. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. We're reading a little bit about restorative justice and looking at it from the I'm a Canadian, so we're looking at it from the Canadian perspective. That says right now we're looking at the quote from section 712 or 718.2e in the Criminal Code of Canada that specifically says, hey, also we have a really high proportion of our prison population that are indigenous. That's probably not a good look, and we should probably really pay attention to the fact that we're over sentencing and consider sentences that are alternatives to the traditional jail answer. So not taking into account that in their system there are no indigenous kids that do adult time for being beat up by cops. I'm not sure I get what you mean, Sugar, but yeah, the fact is the relationship between the system and indigenous people is one that from a very young age is super problematic. I'm speaking completely out of turn because what the fuck do I know about it? I'm a generic white guy on the internet. But I have to plug in my computer again. I had to unplug my computer to charge my phone because dumbass me didn't think to charge my phone earlier today. Now I have to plug in my computer. It looks like I'm hugging you. Imagine me hugging. This is like ASMR, but like fake tactile. Anyways, but we had a show one night that we booked, and we had buddies coming in from Siksika to come play, and they got stopped by the Strathmore RCMP. I don't recall all of the details. This is quite a long time ago, but they were hassled by the RCMP for a long time because why would young indigenous men be in a van full of musical instruments? Obviously, for stealing and selling. It ended up working out. I believe they played the show, but man, were we pissed. Anyways, I get distracted. The Youth Criminal Justice Act, which came into effect in 2003, also includes restorative justice principles and emphasizes offender accountability, rehabilitation, and reintegration. The international community has since come to see restorative justice as a legitimate approach to the administration of criminal justice. In 2003, the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, or DESA, not to be confused with D's Nuts, recognized the importance of restorative justice as another way to address crime and conflict beyond traditional criminal justice methods. In 2016, the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs adopted a resolution considering restorative justice in criminal matters. All right. Court cases. I don't know if we need to go into some of... Oh, I see that word, though. Glad you. So that was actually based on a legal case. The cops beat up indigenous teens and they charge the kids with assault on a police officer. The kids go to jail for years. Yes, that is From what I understand, that is not a rarity. This is that, anytime people are like, well, there's good cops. Hey, maybe. Or maybe not. Because the fact that there are cops that do that and that continue to be cops tells me that the good cops aren't doing their job. The old joke is, how many good cops does it take to change a light bulb? We don't know, because a good cop can't change anything. Okay, indigenous legal traditions. Creating the context, the necessity, and complexity of indigenous legal traditions. Let's read this. According to indigenous legal scholars, prior to the imposition of Western law on indigenous people, indigenous legal traditions were important organizing forces that shaped behavior, guided relationships, and addressed conflict in indigenous societies. As Val Napoleon and Hadley Friedland suggest, indigenous communities had to create laws that could prevent or at least minimize conflict that arises when human beings live together. Moreover, communities also needed to be able to address the conflict and pain after an incident occurred, which usually took the form of a sanction. Much like contemporary Canadian sentencing goals, indigenous legal sanctions were not necessarily punitive/retributive, since they were also motivated by notions of healing, reconciliation, and reintegration. And if need be, they demonstrated deterrence and denunciation. In other words, indigenous legal systems were a source of complex, proactive, and reactive mechanisms that attempted to produce and maintain a stable and predictable social world for indigenous communities. And that sounds like all stuff that we should be learning from. Us in the honky society should be like, oh shit, that's way better than what we've been doing. We're not fixing things. We're just creating school to prison pipelines and then keeping people doing that recidivism game. Maybe we're bad at this. Maybe we should look at other options. So that's a thing. That is a thing. However, it is not. I'm going the wrong way. However, it is not enough to say indigenous legal traditions were/are simply a series of proactive and reactive mechanisms. This takes away from the complexity and richness of indigenous legal systems, which were flexible and adaptable to changing circumstances, emphasized personal and community balance, and did not compartmentalize different sections of law in the same way Western legal systems do. Most indigenous legal systems are/were not sorted into different areas of law like the Canadian legal system, where there are clear distinctions between criminal law, contract law, tort law, constitutional law, maritime law, etc., which is reflected in how these areas of law are taught at law schools, as well as how they are generally implemented and practiced by lawyers. Instead, a common theme throughout most indigenous legal traditions across Canada is the idea of law being interconnected and intertwined. While there might be different sources of law within each indigenous tradition, creation stories, oral traditions, customs, positive, man-made law, these different sources of law do not change the fact that laws are/were all deeply interconnected. For example, the well-being of an indigenous community largely depended on maintaining and fostering interpersonal relationships within the community, but it also depended on how the community maintained its relationships with the land, water, and animal worlds. Therefore, community well-being was maintained through family law, criminal law, law of obligations, and even environmental law, although these were not thought of as different spheres of law or separate legal responsibilities. Instead, they were thought of as a part of a person's kinship network/responsibilities. Therefore, kinship was law. That's a cool concept. I'm not 100% sure that it translates into our society in the way that it currently is, but I feel like maybe it should. Maybe the part of the reason that we're failing so hard is that we keep compartmentalizing and we keep coming up with all of these mechanisms that are Western in focus and based on what we think of as the best possible answer to these things, but maybe they're not. Maybe we're kind of dog shit at this and should learn lessons from people who tried other ways and had some success. That might be a thing we want to do. I don't know. While indigenous legal traditions certainly contain laws that prohibited violence, especially laws prohibiting gendered and sexual violence, these sites of law that prohibited certain actions are not where one should begin a discussion of indigenous law, even indigenous criminal law. Instead, it's important to first be aware that indigenous societies. Hang on, I'm just gonna interject something real quick because this is a thing that pisses me off, and I'm gonna I'm going to just babble for a moment. Fucking Christians act like without Jesus and the commandments, there is no morality. That is patently stupid. And one of the easiest examples of this is indigenous existence for tens of thousands of years. I guess, I don't know what the number is, when the land bridge happened. I think it was like somewhere 11,000 or 18,000 years ago or whatever. But anyways, a buttload long time where people have lived completely separate from the religious tradition of the good old C of E and the RC and all that shit. And yet, they were moral people, and they built moral societies. Societies that not just had morals, but had mechanisms by which to control those who stepped outside those moral boundaries. It's almost as if the Ten Commandments, which are not terribly moral, nor terribly complete, it's almost as if they're not enough, and that they're not the only thing. We still deal with our own people on the DL without outside interference. And so you should at this point. Frankly, the amount of shit and abuse that indigenous folks have had to take from the society that my people are putting you guys through, I get it. I'd be fucking not playing by those rules too. We've been here for over 26,000 years. We didn't cover on the land bridge. I don't know shit about shit, so you'll have to forgive me if I said it dumb, because I'll do that. I'm not always smart. Interestingly, a buddy of mine was working. I don't know what came of it. I think he was going to be published, and I don't think it's been finished yet or not. But he's working on a process to trace through DNA investigations. He's a paleoanthropologist, to trace the more precise migration of people in North America, indigenous people, and then later the honky folk. And I don't know what came of that though. But don't let me give the number and be like, oh, that's when things happen. That is just as any number coming out of me for when indigenous people got here is the same as a fucking short earth creationist telling you that, the earth is 6,000 years old. Clearly, I don't know shit. So, apologies. Instead, it's important to first be aware that indigenous societies did not have a centralized enforcement agency like the contemporary Canadian criminal justice system that could enforce the law through specialized police forces. While there were elders and other respected leaders of the community that might get involved in weighing evidence and judging the truth of an incident, for the most part, law in communities was lived, i.e., individuals aspired to always fulfill their kinship responsibilities, and enforced in decentralized kinship networks. Indeed, kinship was a crucial feature of indigenous legal traditions. Napoleon and Friedland's. Ignore the Napoleon and Friedland part. Since it produced a series of legal obligations and responsibilities toward others in one's family, clan, and larger nation, while also causing those same clan family members to remind and support individuals to fulfill their kinship obligations. In other words, kinship was multidirectional in that it shaped the behavior of individuals as much as it informed and shaped the behavior of the collective. With respect to the origins of kinship, as mentioned earlier, there are many sources of law that indigenous legal traditions look to in trying to produce a stable social environment. A common source among most indigenous legal traditions is an indigenous society's creation story, which generally holds historical knowledge about the land, but also prescribed teachings and values, especially the significance of reciprocal, i.e. kinship, relationships. For example, the Haudenosaunee creation story depicts the way animals helped Sky Woman when she fell from the sky world, first cradling her in the wings of birds so she did not crash into the water on Earth, to placing her back on the back of a giant turtle so she had somewhere to stay, to helping her plant vegetables in dirt and mud that an otter fetched from the ocean floor. While this story continues to describe the creation of the world, the important value to take away from even this short excerpt is the importance of relationships and helping others, which produces obligations towards those that helped you. According to the, again, I'm going to say this wrong, Haudenosaunee worldview, it should also be noted that since animals and plants helped Sky Woman when she first came to the Earth and helped her raise her children, humanity's obligations extend to the animal and plant worlds, which is actually a common value found in all indigenous societies in Canada. It's still central to our existence. There are only 1.3 million of us in all of Canada. If you fuck up, everyone knows. Yep. Oh, Hudinase. Thank you, sugar. Yeah, that's again why the idea of turning your back on someone who created or did an act out of like genuine malice is so effective. Is 1.3 million people turn their back on you, and they're all your connection and all your association to the land. You're fucked. That's a really cool thing. It's easy to forget, what proportion of our country is indigenous or whatever, because like as a honky, because I grew up in a very white community with very white. There was one indigenous kid in my community that I can remember, and he was adopted. I believe it was fostered. He had some kind of, I think, leukemia, and I believe he was fostered as a means to get access to healthcare, but I'm not sure. I could be 100%, like we're going back, to when I was a child, so like 7-8 years. Just kidding. But the fact remains, I lived in a very milquetoast honky town, in a very milquetoast honky community inside that town, in a very milquetoast honky country, and so it's kind of fascinating to me when I have met many fantastic indigenous people in my days, and to realize that like I just we just didn't, they were a factor of the past, and that was my mental relationship, whether intentional or otherwise. It was easier to think of them as people who existed in a proud and noble tradition before the white man came to settle the land. I don't know. I don't know if I'm making sense or not, but it's a weird thing to realize that you're wrong, and that there's all these people and they're not what you think they are, and that's actually pretty cool, that they're pretty cool people. Some of them are jerks just like the rest of us, but a lot of them, I got some fucking great friends that are indigenous people, and if I lived in that same world, I wouldn't have that. It's a weird thing. I don't know. That's a half-formed thought. You'll have to forgive me. Since kinship has its... Oh, what was the other thing I was going to say? I think it's popped out of my head. If it pops back in, I'll pause and continue. Since kinship has its roots in the original instructions... Oh, I remember what I was going to say. It was interesting. So we were talking about that creation story of the Hudinase people. The Sky Woman fell to Earth, was caught by birds who safely transported her onto Turtle, and that was sort of the relationship. And their whole point being the creation story has this natural, look after one another kind of a vibe. And then you think about the Christian creation story, which is God just invented you and was like, I'm the fucking boss. Do whatever you want. We're good. Do whatever you want. But don't fucking cross me. And then they did, and he's like, right, you're fucking out. That feels so much whiter now that I think of it in that context. Yes, if our kids got sick and we lived on reserve, they took our kids. That tracks. People forget we are still here because they don't see us represented in mainstream media. Mainstream media, in politics, in anything, realistic. And I'm very happy that I know people who are indigenous and that I don't make that mistake. But yeah, you don't see, you maybe see the occasional indigenous leader in Canada, somebody who's like an MP or an MLA or what have you. But there's just no emphasis put on them. And mainstream media, that's why one of the reasons I loved Blood Quantum is because it's such a different take on the traditional zombie story, and it's because it's a take from a completely different perspective, an indigenous perspective that was fucking well done. It was a great movie, balls-out awesome. If you haven't seen it, go watch it today. It's so good. I believe you can still buy it for like $5 on streaming services and stuff. It might be on some for free if you're lucky, but just a ridiculously good movie because it was, an indigenous people acting in an indigenous movie and directing an indigenous movie that was very much, like a zombie movie, but very unique and very fucking amazing. Yeah, great movie. Sorry, where was I? Since kinship has its roots in the original instructions given to human beings, but it's also supported in man-made law, the kinship was a serious site for moral and legal guidance, although kinship produced proactive actions more than it prohibited actions. In other words, in the face of decentralized power networks that emphasizing creating and maintaining good relationships, kinship can be described as legally requiring individuals to act or carry themselves in a way that ensured good relations rather than prohibiting certain actions. However, the idea of requiring good relations and good conduct not only misses very explicit laws prohibiting certain acts, especially sexual violence, but more importantly, it misses the cultural institutions and practices that work together to naturalize positive interpersonal conduct. Much like an indigenous nation's creation story informed the importance of kinship, an indigenous society's creation story also underlined those cultural practices that shaped a person's childhood, which in turn ensured an individual grew up into adulthood with an awareness and understanding of their kinship responsibilities. However, kinship could not always guarantee one would live up to what was expected of them. I'm still like just tripping over this realization about the Christian creation story. When it comes to sexual violence, God was like, "Oh, you seem lonely. Let me just invent you a woman to fuck. Let me just pull one out of your body. Now, oh, there, she's of you. So, you get to chattel on her." That is so interesting. I have never looked at the Christian creation story in that context. Obviously, these are not new realizations like, oh my goodness, Eve was not a willing participant. No, I don't mean like that. I mean, like thinking about it in terms of what does that story as a creation story mean for how we interpreted our role in the world and the world. Yeah, sexualized violence is normalized in the Bible. I'll go you one better. I would say sexual violence is encouraged in the Bible. There are far too many, as is child abuse, there are far too many instances in the Bible where consent is just like not even a thing. Where rape is, here's how you go about taking child brides from your war slaves. All of that kind of stuff. Like defined processes for, it would be immoral for you to take a harem of people that you didn't properly murder their family first. That kind of shit. Like that's a spooky fucking stuff. Spooky fucking stuff. All right. Responding to antisocial behavior and violence. At this point, it's important to restate that indigenous legal traditions via kinship networks attempted to produce a stable and predictable social environment for community members in the face of inevitable conflict. Cut the child in half, spare the rod, spoil the child, etc. Yeah. And, God sending, one of his friends was bald and some kids made fun of him for being bald, so God sent bears to eat the children. Like, yeah, that's cool. What a loving and forgiving God you are. Please don't bear attack me. When kinship responsibilities were ignored or failed to shape someone's behavior, various legal responses were activated in order to restore community balance, promote safety, and if necessary, demonstrate deterrence and denunciation. Sanctions were therefore multifaceted and tried to achieve multiple goals, although the harshness of potential sanctions, especially those sanctions that attempted to demonstrate deterrence and denunciation, were held in check by important qualifications. Considering that historically indigenous communities generally did not have police, sanctions were usually enforced by family members, extended family members, or members of the same clan. This meant healing, reconciliation, and reintegration were priorities, if not the first response. As Napoleon and Hadley point out, even if the person had committed a serious offense, the first response was not to inflict pain or seek vengeance, since the offender was also a family and community member and someone that was loved. However, this does not mean that the offender reintegration and healing always prevailed over individual and community safety. For example, in historic, is it still Haudenosaunee society, witchcraft was considered a very serious criminal offense, since it gave a person too much power and could lead to them causing harm and or neglect their kinship responsibilities. If someone was accused of practicing witchcraft, the first response would be to determine the truth of the accusation. If there was truth to the accusation, then community and family members would confront the person and ask them to stop, while also determining the accused's willingness to stop. Depending on the accused person's responses, the community could perform healing ceremonies to counteract their power if they were willing to give up practicing witchcraft to watching them and observing their behavior with the hope of eventually performing ceremonies. If they were reluctant and or seemed disingenuous about stopping practicing witchcraft, to banishment and or execution if they continue to cause harm and refuse to stop practicing witchcraft. There's kind of this interesting thing that's happening in this where they're, and I think this is what my people does. I don't know that this system, and I don't know one way or the other. I don't know that the system was so much, like a hard and fast set of rules and whatnot, as it was just, this is how we deal with these things, because we're social animals and we have to live in a society. Ours is a small society. We have a creation myth. We have all of these things. We know what is right. We know what is not right, and we expect you to do what's right. And you're gonna do wrong and everything, and there's gonna be a scale of reactions, just like there is with any parent sibling type relationship, for example, or parent child relationship, for example. But there's this sort of like this vibe of like, yes, and in the system that they invented, it kind of feels like us honkies trying to think of it in contrast to the defined Western system, and I don't think it is as defined, and I don't think it needs to be as defined, if that makes any sense. Witchcraft equals using bad medicine, wishing bad things on someone. Yes. Not using magic, using bad magic and doing bad things. Our thoughts become our actions, so that's why that is bad. Yes, absolutely. I like that. In Anishinaabe society, the Wetiko or Wendigo was thought of to be a cannibalistic spirit that could inhabit human beings and make a person do things they normally wouldn't, like murder and or eat members of their family/community. If a community member was thought to be turning into a Wetiko or was possessed by a Wetiko, the community's response depended on the offender's actions, the possibility of them being healed, and or whether they represented a serious threat to themselves and the community. Like witchcraft, healing and reintegration were first responses, which was achieved through a combination of careful interventions, supervision, and ceremonies. However, if healing was unlikely, making offender reintegration impossible, then it was likely the person would be executed to ensure the safety of the community. Many indigenous societies created explicit laws prohibiting sexual and gendered violence, so sanctions could be especially harsh as a way to demonstrate deterrence and denunciation. It is as well as hold the offender responsible for their actions. Unlike Canadian criminal justice practices, but much in line with indigenous philosophies and kinship practices, the victims of sexual violence had an important role in determining the offender's sanction and punishment. The rationale for centering the victim in the entire process was to restore balance in their life, as well as restore balance in the rest of the community. Since sexual and gendered violence was an especially despised crime and was thought to disrupt the community's moral balance, the most common sanction used in response to instances of sexual violence was corporal punishment, although some indigenous societies were known to use banishment and execution primarily when there were concerns for broader public safety. I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to take another quick jump outside. I will be back in a moment, but I'll leave you with, I'm gonna put a different, I already set up a different song. I'm going to leave you with a song called Backdrop Muzak, which is Muzak for the backdrops. I will be right back. returned. Oh, no. Don't start playing again. There we go. Okay. We whip them. The victims of sexual crime get the first crack and the perpetrator's face is marked so everyone can see their crime and they can't hide. Nothing wrong with that. It's interesting because, while I was outside not doing anything immoral, I was thinking about, us honky folk and our reaction, which is being weaponized, particularly right now with the whole groomers thing. Our reaction to sexual violence is usually very, very in keeping with our creation story and whatnot. It is an eye for an eye. It is, beat them mercilessly and all that kind of stuff. And on the one hand, I super get it. I super get that. But there's it's such a thing. There's got to be better ways for us to interact that don't involve, murdering people. It feels like we should be able to do better than that. But I don't know what those things are yet. I'm not, I'm not saying shit about shit. But the weaponization of that has been really grotesque lately with the whole, the whole trans debate has been nothing more than moral outrage masquerading as defending children from this evil world and these evil people that are in it. And it's grotesque. It's absolutely grotesque, and it's becoming, it's just, yeah. Some people need killing. I'm gonna put fascists and the far right into that pile. It's just how I feel. People are free to believe whatever they want, but not on my island. Not that I own an island, but if I owned an island, not on my fucking island. Ah, that is good beer. I like that. So I'm going to keep reading because I've been enjoying this so far. I hope you have too. At the very least, enjoying me learning stuff and just trying to look at, what can I do for Canada Day that doesn't involve proudly waving my fuck Trudeau signs and being like, wow, you know what I should do? Storm on the government. I would leave my kid in a library with a drag queen way before I'd leave them at church. Yeah, facts, 100%. Also, I watched this debate and they were talking about it and they kept missing the point, and that so Texas is planning on or has raised the idea of criminalizing when a parent takes a child to a drag show. And what's dumb about that is the assumption is that any drag show has to be sexual, right? Drag at the fucking library where we're doing like the drag queen story hour and stuff. I'm no expert, but I have a funny feeling like they're not pole dancing and wearing thongs. They're probably dressed just as erotically as a young Hillary Clinton. And, who gives a shit? That's not ruining the moral fabric of our society. That's just fucking stupid. The idea of criminalizing that behavior implies that there is no possible scenario wherein a drag show could be done in a suitable for children environment. And that seems patently fucking stupid. All theater all theater used to be drag. Women weren't allowed on stage, depending on the country. There were, but the Western theater, the Shakespeare's and all of that, typically women's roles were played by men. And there is some truth to that, absolutely, but the argument would be that wasn't drag, that was an actor, a thespian. and I am playing the role of the woman because women cannot possibly act, whereas I, a thespian, can do so perfunctorily, or whatever the fuck. I still think that's silly. It's just as gross as, like, you know, when I was a kid, when I was a boy. If you didn't have someone of a particular skin tone and you were doing a play that had a character in that skin tone, well, that's why Jesus invented makeup. And that was okay. Okie dokie. So when Trudeau, noted drama teacher, once went, or not once, but, you know, a couple of times in the past, i.e. all of the photos are like black and white pretty much, went in blackface, I don't think he was trying to be a dick. I think most of the instances of blackface that happened in that sort of timeline were not intentional dickishness. They worked out being dickish. They were completely not like dismissive of the humanity of other people. But I think the people who were doing them weren't like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to be insulting. Bahaha! I think they were just like, hey, I want to go as Aladdin. That's something that society hasn't told me I shouldn't do, and I'm too thoughtless to think about the fact, so I'm just going to paint myself up. Yeah, it was a different time. That's not a justification. That doesn't mean that this was a good act or a morally acceptable act. Certainly by today's standards, it was neither of those things. But my argument would be that at the time, it was still pretty fucking shitty. We just didn't think about it because we had that luxury, because we were the whites and we could do what we goddamn well pleased. And no one would have thought about it, right? Wearing costumes that were, traditions of people. Okay. We're white. We can do what the fuck we want. Now, the reason I think people are so pissy about getting called out for that is because deep down, I think we all know that's a shitty thing to do. And, you know, Trudeau doing it, that's not me justifying. That was a shitty thing to do. It was thoughtless and stupid and unnecessary, right? At no point in anyone's life is there a situation where someone has a gun in your face going, you better dress as Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves or some bullshit, right? That doesn't happen. That's not real. So he chose to do a costume that was insensitive. He may not have recognized it was insensitive, but that doesn't change the fact it was fucking insensitive. And if he gets in shit for it, good. Good. Is it enough to keep him from getting elected? Clearly not. Spaghetti Westerns, Johnny Depp playing Tonto. Yep. The joke in Tropic Thunder of fucking Tony Stark Iron Man dude. I'm so bad at celebrities. You know who I mean. Playing a black guy. And it was intentionally played up in the story as a thing. Everything Adam Sandler does in Canada. Honestly, there's no excusing Adam Sandler. Sort of period, end of sentence. I enjoy Adam Sandler, but it's in the same way that I can enjoy like an old Bill Hicks sketch, but I can enjoy it and be like, and that's because, you know, I'm broken or whatever. Like that. Even casting, what's his fucking name? Ben Kingsley into the role of my brain stopped. Gandhi, right? And people are like, oh no, Ben Kingsley is like 1/64th from India, so it's okay. That's, you know, that kind of stuff never gets old. I'm sure people love it when they go, well, you know, I'm 1/64th Cherokee princess, so I get to use all sorts of terrible words because that's my people. Fuck you, it's not your people, right? And if it was your people, you'd probably be a little more fucking tactful and reasonable about it. Just a thought. Just my 2 cents. Yeah. I feel strongly as a generic Western European shit mix, which is exactly like if I 23'd in me, it would just come back generic Western European shit mix. like there's no reason. And they never tell the truth about Gandhi. Yes, Gandhi was a very difficult person who had many sides to him. Much like all of us, he was not a perfect person. He was, in fact, quite flawed, in some cases quite gross. I am no expert, but I did watch an episode of Bullshit, which makes me an expert because I have my Dunning-Kruger Award. But yeah, like, no one is a fucking superhero. And when we treat them like that, it's pretty fucking tacky. Anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. Let's get back to our document because I'm enjoying, and we're going to read some more. All right, where was I? Where's my tab? Fuck, there it is. Okay. So many. I think I already read. Yes, I already read that. Okay. Support for indigenous legal traditions. And again, if you're just joining us, which I don't think anyone is, because I'm a small stream in Andy. Oh, Che, how you doing, Che? I was just saying, no one just joined, and then Che joined. How you doing, Che? I hope you're well, my friend. So what we're doing right now is we're looking at a document. What is it called? We're on page 9. Report on the relationship between restorative justice and indigenous legal traditions in Canada. We've gone through quite a bit of this. We first looked at sort of what is restorative justice, and oh, you're sick? I'm sorry to hear that, my friend. If I could heal you, I would, but I can cheers you. Clunk. I love you, and I hope you feel better soon, my friend. Yeah, so we looked at some examples, and I learned a bunch, but more importantly, we all learned a bunch together. And by we all, I mean me and Sugar, and I am Canadian, and Sugar already knew all this, so it is really just me. I'm the one that learned things. Anyways, learning is yearning. I don't know. I'm making shit up. So, support for indigenous legal traditions. Indigenous legal traditions have received both international and domestic support for the recognition, revitalization, and full integration and implementation alongside the legal systems of nation-states. While there are numerous sources to draw upon, the most significant resources demonstrating this support are the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the Canadian Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. Both of these documents describe the place and role of Indigenous people in international and Canadian politics. That is, these documents envision a decolonized world and provide a clear path to achieve this vision, where Indigenous peoples are treated with respect and dignity, which means having their cultural, spiritual, social, political, economic, and legal institutions protected and respected. I don't want to read about the UN or the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Not that those things aren't important, but I guess the key here is this part. In terms of indirect support, the TRC calls to actions 27, 28, and 50 provide guidance regarding educational and institution initiatives that can foster the growth of Indigenous legal traditions in Canada. Call to Action 27 encourages the Federation of Law Societies in Canada to have provincial law societies provide their members with cultural competency training in areas such as Aboriginal and treaty rights, Crown Indigenous relations, and most significantly Indigenous law. Call to Action 28 is similar, but calls upon Canadian law schools to require all law students take at least one course that discusses Aboriginal and treaty rights, UNDRIP, and most significantly Indigenous legal systems. Finally, Call to Action 50 requires different levels of government in Canada to fund Indigenous law societies, or law institutes. How am I reading societies when I see institutes? Which would develop, analyze, and utilize Indigenous legal traditions. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action, as well as the TRC final report, have much to say regarding the relationship between Indigenous legal traditions and reconciliation in Canada. Indeed, the calls to action, but more so the final report, contain details discussing how Indigenous legal traditions can contribute to reconciliation, which can be categorized into two general streams. The first is the symbolic significance of implementing Indigenous legal traditions in Canada. Considering that Canada was historically suppressed knowledge of Indigenous legal traditions, and has denied the existence of such traditions, Implementing indigenous legal systems would represent a major shift towards reconciliation in the relationship between Canada and indigenous people. It would signal a shift away from the ongoing colonialism towards a nation-to-nation relationship based on respect, which, if you read Treaty 7, is kind of what we sold the idea of, and then just, as the white folk, we kind of failed every step of the way. And by failed, I mean never had any interest in fulfilling. The second stream is more substantive and pragmatic in the sense that utilizing individual indigenous legal traditions and approaching them as actual laws can facilitate healing and reconciliation in a way that is meaningful and relevant to the people and local communities involved. This goes beyond the symbolic significance of what implementing indigenous legal traditions would represent, since most indigenous legal traditions contain values, processes, protocols, and ceremonies that actively promote healing and reconciliation by addressing and moving beyond colonialism and its ongoing aftermath. For example, Haudenosaunee people practice a ceremony rooted in their own laws and kinship practices called the condolence ceremony. The condolence ceremony is usually performed in times of personal and nationwide grief, and done with the intention of restoring balance in the community. According to the TRC final report, the condolence ceremony allows people who've been through traumatic experiences together, those who are healthy, those who are in mourning, and those who have caused harm, to work together to address losses. Through this ceremony, apologies and restitution are embodied in expressive performances as people are called upon to tell stories and acknowledge losses related to the harms they've suffered. The ceremony occurs in precise sequence, employing vivid imagery, and can be used in many circumstances where trust and understanding have been broken because of a party's harmful actions. The condolence ceremony can provide a way for Haudenosaunee people to establish a new and equal relationship with Canadians, especially in the wake of the Indian residential school experience. Healing and reconciliation would be grounded in Haudenosaunee laws, ceremonies, and diplomatic protocols. The Mi'kmaq people of the Maritime region, or Mi'kmaq territory, also have laws and ceremonies that contribute to healing and reconciliation in the wake of the Indian residential school experience. Like the Haudenosaunee, reconciliation to the Mi'kmaq people relies on respecting and following Mi'kmaq laws, which means Canada and church officials should engage in Mi'kmaq ceremonies, feasts, protocols, and dialogues with Mi'kmaq people, with the intention of opening up space for new relationships to develop. With that in mind, ceremonies, feasts, apologies, protocols, dialogue, and restitution represent a common approach to reconciliation amongst other Indigenous nations in Canada. However, this does not mean that each Indigenous nation's approach to reconciliation is the same. On the contrary, the final report stresses that a one-size-fits-all approach is counterproductive to achieving reconciliation with Indigenous nations. Canada must approach each Indigenous nation as a distinct people with their own unique histories and cultures, and begin the hard work that reconciliation requires in a way that prioritizes local Indigenous laws and protocols. As the final report points out, however, Indigenous people should not be coerced to participate in reconciliation processes, but instead should be able to decide when and how they will engage with Canada. I like that. I like the idea of this being an example of ways that reconciliation can take place, and that nation-to-nation interaction start to establish. As I've been sort of saying all along, the more I read about restorative justice, the more I'm like, why the fuck are we not stealing that idea? Like, we steal everything else, that's what we do. Why are we not looking at our own systems and saying, we could do better? And here's an example of a very thoughtful and wise approach to justice that is quite possibly a vast improvement on what we've been doing, because we're not nailing it. So maybe we should be listening. And it just seems like an example of where we could get together as equals and say, like, hey, you have stuff you can show us. Let's work together. Yeah. Status of Indigenous legal traditions in Canada. We're on page 12 of 17, so we're making some progress. Colonialism and its effects on kinship and Indigenous law. Why do I have a feeling like it's not going to have been a good impact? While the status of restorative justice programs in Canada does not require further elaboration, it is crucial to inform readers about the status of Indigenous legal traditions in Canada, especially colonialism's effect on kinship. As we pointed out earlier, kinship was an important organizing force in historic indigenous societies, considering it produced multi-directional legal obligations towards everyone and everything. Unfortunately, the residential school experience, aka honkies, shit, I lost my place because I was being smug, hating my own people, smugly. Unfortunately, the residential school experience, the gradual erosion of indigenous languages, the imposition of band council governments, the destruction of lands and ecosystems, the overall attack on indigenous legal systems, as well as the prosecution and jailing of indigenous leaders who fought to maintain their traditional kinship legal system, have all had a disastrous effect on the role of kinship in communities, as well as an overall negative impact on general awareness of the importance of kinship. Although kinship still functions to a certain degree in most indigenous communities, in terms of providing a loose framework to guide interpersonal and familial relationships, to having an influence on the actions of leaders, and even informing a person's obligations to the land, it cannot be said that kinship mediates all aspects of social and political life in indigenous communities. Colonialism has been very destructive to indigenous kinship practices. Well, I, for one, was shocked. As for actual indigenous legal systems, despite the weakening of kinship, knowledge of the content of indigenous legal tradition continues to exist in stories, oral traditions, books, scholarship, and most importantly, in the minds and memories of community elders and leaders. Unfortunately, this knowledge does not mean indigenous legal systems are the primary legal systems that guide communities. Instead, the Criminal Code of Canada applies to First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. Moreover, First Nation communities exercise very limited legislative authority under the Indian Act, which is a federal piece of legislation that gives the Department of Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada a large amount of bureaucratic oversight over Indigenous communities. Laughing my ass off at the smug thing. Well, that's fair. But alabaster people only feel obligated to each other when they have a common enemy. I would say that's only partly true. I'm not saying that we're, oh no, we're better than that. I would say that we feel obligated to each other when we have a connection, right? I have homies I would die for. I have people in my life that I would take bullets or give bullets for in a heartbeat. But I don't have that connection with my society. I don't have that sense of obligation to people who are not immediately in my very close-knit circle. And that's me admitting that I suck. So, take that as you will. Revitalization and future commitments. Despite the limited status of Indigenous legal traditions in relation to Canada's other legal systems, Indigenous legal traditions are currently being revitalized. The revitalization of Indigenous law is in the early stages of development, where knowledge of their content is being uncovered, recovered, and recorded. While knowledge recovery is not the same as law application and enforcement, it is still important, since as this knowledge is gathered over time, this collection of data and knowledge can act as a resource for communities as they explore the possibility of implementing their legal traditions in the future. As Indigenous communities look to the future, they will inevitably be confronted with challenges, including but not limited to the different ways their legal systems will need to be adjusted to meet contemporary human rights standards, as well as how their legal systems can address ongoing social problems, particularly violence against women and other vulnerable populations. Legal scholars have pointed out that Indigenous communities can implement their legal systems while simultaneously addressing these issues, since Indigenous laws can evolve and change over time. That is, the authenticity of contemporary Indigenous legal systems must not be judged and or dismissed according to how well they reflect historic practices. Instead, the legitimacy of contemporary Indigenous legal traditions should be determined according to how well they address community conflict and if the local community accepts the legal system as legitimate. In practice, this would have a more direct impact on the kinds of sanctions Indigenous communities would be able to deliver. Most drastically, communities would not be able to use execution as a penalty, since execution goes against international as well as Canadian human rights standards. However, communities may be able to punish certain offenders using corporal punishment, such as lashing or whipping, as long as the community consents to its use as a sanction in a referendum or some other democratic process. Oh shit, imagine how the white people would freak out if like a legitimate penalty for a crime was whipping. Boy, the honkies would be beside themselves. According to legal scholar David Millward, Corporal punishment could be an important sanction for indigenous communities in light of the enormous amount of evidence demonstrating the ineffectiveness of prisons as a deterrent, the physical and psychological harm imprisonment has on individuals, and most importantly, the overuse of incarceration for indigenous people. However, considering corporal punishment is considered contrary to human rights standards, Millward suggests that offenders could sign a waiver indicating that they wish to waive their rights in that particular instance and be subjected to corporal punishment instead. According to Millward, the types of offenses this would apply to would be highly speculative at the current moment. But it's safe to suggest that corporal punishment as a sanction could apply to instances of assault and sexual assault, but also criminal negligence causing bodily harm. When looking to the future, indigenous legal systems must be able to address the effects of colonization that oftentimes manifest in communities. While there are numerous ways to measure the effect of colonization, it is arguably most evident and observable by looking at the levels of violence in indigenous communities, especially the gendered and sexual violence directed against women, two-spirited people, and other vulnerable populations, especially children. As was discussed earlier, in historical terms, a series of cultural institutions and practices encouraged individuals to fulfill their kinship obligations, making gendered and sexual violence, especially within the family, community, and nation, truly abhorrent and revolting. In the future, indigenous legal traditions must address the violence and restore balance in communities, meaning communities might potentially use harsh sanctions such as corporal punishment alongside imprisonment to demonstrate deterrence and denunciation. In this instance, imprisonment would reflect how communities historically banish people that committed sexual violence, although imprisonment is almost always only a temporary form of banishment. It would be up to communities to decide how they might address the temporariness of imprisonment. There are certain people who go missing, and we don't waste our time looking for them. Yes, I wonder what we call those people. If only there was a name for it, like a missing and murdered indigenous women and girls. There's something like that. I'm just spitballing. The ongoing relationship between indigenous legal traditions and restorative justice. The relationship between restorative justice and indigenous legal traditions is more complex and nuanced than this report has indicated so far. This feels like a boring paragraph, so I'm going to skip it. And I don't think we need to read the conclusion. Instead, I think we should just tie a bow on things and sort of share our thoughts. So, all in all, I really, really enjoyed reading about that. I always hear about restorative justice from white people, and it holds about as much merit as when they say that all indigenous people get free college education, which is not accurate. And if you are one of those people who says that, you are wrong. And it's always in the form of like, yeah, some person committed a murder and they had to go to a sweat lodge for 3 weeks and then they were just released. That shit ain't real. First off, we established that those are not the laws that restorative justice is currently being applied to. And second off, there is not an indigenous group on the planet who are like, yeah, that seems like a valuable way to protect our community from this person. That's not a thing. Restorative justice is about finding ways for communication and for rehabilitation into the society. So it may very well be that a part of the person's sentence was, partaking in a sweat lodge, and that probably came from, if this story is even remotely true, probably would have come from elders in the community who were looking at this person who has done this thing, which was probably not murder, and saying, you are lost. You have not connected with us, and we have not connected with you, and we need to change that. We need to show you where you come from and who you are, and bring you into our culture and our traditions, and reconnect and rekindle that sense of self inside you. That makes a whole fuck of a lot more sense than just, indigenous people don't have to go to jail anymore because in the government book it said so. No, that's not the way. I really enjoyed just getting a better understanding of this and putting together the idea in my head of what this actually looks like as best as I can as a person who's not indigenous and a person who's not typically involved in the legal system and all of that shit. I am an outsider looking in all aspects, but as an outsider, like, this shit just sounds good. Just sounds good. Reconnecting communities, building sensible approaches to how we try to rehabilitate, because our current honky-driven system don't rehabilitate anybody, right? In fact, it makes it, especially in like the U.S., where you can't like get a job if you've been to jail, but you get out of jail and you're like, okay, well, now what? I guess I have one skill I can use, the thing that got me into jail in the first place. Let's give it back. Yes, let's give it back. Land back. And if anyone watching, of the millions and millions of you that are watching right now, heard me say land back and went, oh no, Jim is a terrible person who wants the white folk to be genocided because of something, or have us all moved back to, the Britain. No, that's not what I said. I said land back. And if you do a little digging into what the land back movement is saying, that's not what it's saying. The sweat lodge is to cleanse them, all intoxicants, etc. It's a small part. Need a clear mind to understand the whole process. Oh, for sure. And again, what I'm getting at, what I'm hoping to get at, is that one thing would not have been the story that we're hearing is always bullshit. And we need, as honkies, people like me need to be like, hey, that's not real. That is 100% not real. And that's part of why I came up with the idea of doing some digging on restorative justice a couple of weeks ago. And I was like, yeah, that'll be interesting. I'll dig into that. And then I was like, oh, I could do that on stream. That'd be fun. We could have like a whole learning process. And my original plan was to do it tomorrow. And then today I had free time. And I was like, you know what? Let's do it on Canada Day. Let's do it on Canada Day, where we can be like, hey, Canada, it's your birthday for Confederacy. How's that truth and reconciliation thing coming? Are we making progress? I do think we are making progress, but I don't think we're making enough progress. I don't think we're making enough tangible progress to be out there patting ourselves in the backs going, yay, Canada, we're the greatest at things like making maple syrup and producing hockey players who will get rich in the United States. And, oh, we're really good at having all the Michael J. Foxes. And, oh, we did that genocide. But shh. And also, we have Toronto. So, like, the center of the universe. I don't feel like being out there cheering today. I don't believe that we've earned that. I know that we're doing stuff. And I know that I said at the very start of this, I said, I think it's fair to say that in some regards, Indigenous people are probably doing better than they have at any time in history where they were under our colonial control. That's a terrible, terrible statement, because they're not doing great compared to, John Q. Honky. And that's not fair. That's not right. But I think it's fair to say that this is the since we showed up, this is the best that they've had. And there's so much more to do. And anytime we go, well, what can I do? Read the fucking calls to action in the Truth and Reconciliation final report. Read the calls to action in the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls report. Do things to learn. I suck at this, and that's why I'm doing it, is because I don't know these things. I just know that my ignorance ain't helping anybody. So I just want to do better. Land back just means Indigenous people get the last word on land use because we are the stewards of the land. And I've heard about a bajillion different answers for what land back means. None of them involve the word, kicking honkies out, except when white people tell the story. Land back, from what I understand, is essentially, reconciliation, and not in the like, do these 94 things and we're good, but in essentially treating all of the indigenous land as being indigenous. And by indigenous land, I mean fucking all of it. The land that I'm currently sitting on is indigenous land. And that doesn't mean indigenous people want to kick me out. A great example of that, I remember seeing a thing in the paper a couple of, or no, it was on the news, probably like a bunch of months ago. I don't do time so good, but there was a story about, I think it was in Vancouver, there was a sect of land that was supposed to go back to indigenous people. And the honkies, they did a freak out. Because, oh no, and it was like downtown Vancouver, if I'm not mistaken. There was this tract of land that was like in the treaties, like this is supposed to be for you, and then we took it. And they won the case, and they, were able to assume ownership of it. And they didn't just like kick all the white people out and go, oh, we're going to kick you all out because go back to Edmonton, you fucks. They just owned the land, and they took care of it. And they built, if I'm not mistaken, they built really nice housing that was both for regular, use, and also some low-income housing, but was still really nice housing. And they made sure there was things like hospital type facilities, and like I don't remember all the details, but they didn't do all of the genociding that we keep thinking. Do you know why we as white folks think that? Because that's what we did. That's what we did when we got here. And then we're like, well, but then they'll do it back to us. Not if we don't treat them like shit. Not if we approach the conversation in good faith and with respect, and also accept the fact that, yeah, maybe if land back, if they said, yeah, get the fuck out, I don't like that, I don't support that, but I am on stolen land. At the end of the day, like, sorry, white folks. I don't know. And the thing is that's far-fetched. That's not a thing that's on anyone's minds. What's on their minds, if I understand correctly, is being treated fairly and equally, and having the same access to opportunity, and having the ability to use the glories of this fantastic country to help themselves as well. God knows we've been doing that. Yeah, we don't think that way. We don't collectively harm others. And that was clear in all of the stuff that we read today, right? The whole concept of the legal systems that we were talking about was not about punishing. It was punitive only as like a, okay, sometimes you gotta. But it wasn't like, you know what, you stole from me, I'm gonna get even. I'm gonna get even with you. It was none of that shit. That's our people's shit, right? Retribution. Turn the other cheek. Fuck that hippie, man. No way. Eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. That's my people. Right? That's not what we were reading. That's not what historically has been the case. And if we are able to implement these kinds of restorative justice programs, it should be a hallmark of the fact that is a legal tradition based on respect and love, one that seeks to fix the problem, not put the problem in jail until it's too old to fuck around again. But don't get me wrong, I'm no legal scholar. What the fuck do I know about anything? I read stuff and it made sense, and it made more sense than what we're doing. Don't get me wrong, that or school to prison pipeline is, that's some choice stuff. We're nailing it, but maybe there are other ways. That's my thoughts. I've a whole bunch of enjoyed this, I have to say. I've been streaming for 3.25 hours, and yeah, I can safely say I learned a lot. Though we do count coup, touch someone's life without them knowing, that's for good and bad deeds. So here's the thing. That is such a common phrase, counting coup. As a dude who is white, I have no idea what that means. My only knowledge of what counting coup means comes from comic books, and I'm pretty sure it's wrong. It was essentially like if you had beef with somebody, you would walk up and you would put your hand on their shoulder and you'd be like, "These are all the people I've killed, or all the shit I've done, or whatever," and the other person would be like, "You killed more people than me. We're good." That's totally how I've had that explained to me. I'm fairly certain that's wrong. I wonder if I can look for a quick. What is counting coup? Okay, we got Wikipedia. This will potentially answer. Among the Plains Indians, why do they have to say that word? Among the indigenous people of the plains of North America, counting coup is a warrior tradition of winning prestige against an enemy in battle. It's one of the traditional ways of showing bravery in the face of an enemy, and it involves intimidating him, and it is hoped persuading him to admit defeat without having to kill him. These victories may then be remembered, recorded, and recounted as part of the community's oral, written, and pictorial histories. Sugar says, "In the old days, we would sneak into their camp and take something they cherished, like their favorite knife." That's cool. That's not what Wikipedia is telling me, but if I'm going to listen to somebody, it's not going to be Wikipedia. So, historically, any blow struck against the enemy counted as a coup, but the most prestigious acts included touching an enemy with a hand, bow, or coup stick, and escaping unharmed and without harming the enemy except for the enemy's wounded pride. That lines more up with what you're saying. Maybe Wikipedia has some hope after all. Touching the first enemy to die in battle or touching the enemy's defensive works was considered counting coup, and has in some nations, simply riding up to an enemy, touching him with a short stick, and riding away unscathed. Counting coup has at times also involved stealing an enemy's weapon or horses tied up to his lodge in camp. Risk of injury or death is traditionally required to count coup. Escaping unharmed while counting coup is traditionally considered a higher honor than being wounded in the attempt. I mentioned this to a white friend who tried to make it sound like I was insane and lived in the city too long. Well, that's because white people don't understand things. This actually makes perfect sense. Like, and we see this in white people movies. The guy shows up and you walk into the room, doobity doobity doo, and all of a sudden there's the gun at the back of your head, and the guy's like, "I could have killed you. You never would have even knew I was here. I could have ended your life, but I'm not. You will never show your face around these parts again." That shit, right? That shit. That is kind of similar-ish. It's different, but it's the same sort of that vibe of I'm proving to you that I have bravery. Well, in that case, it's not so much bravery as I'm a really good ambush attacker. You know what I mean. Like, we could have killed them, but we chose not to because life is still a precious gift. Yes, and that thing that in some cultures, I saved your life, and that means I'm responsible for you for the rest of your life. That shit. It's because we do know that life is precious. And we do know that if someone who hates us and wants to kill us has the opportunity and doesn't, then there is a certain amount of like, okay, let's talk this through. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I don't get it, but like, that seems a thing. When people do good deeds, we gift them anonymously too. That's something that I think is very, very beautiful. There's not enough of that in this world. And it's funny because like, I've my most notable anonymous gift came from, we were doing the Beer Core Awards one year, and I made a comment online. I was like, yeah, I want to rent a tux, but I really don't, I can't afford it, and I won't get paid until like it'll be way too close to the date. So I'm gonna wear dress clothes. I'm not gonna wear a tux, because I had always rented a tux, and I always looked dapper AF. And then I got home from work, and there was an envelope in the mailbox, and I opened it up, and I still have the card, and it says like, you are a special unicorn, or you're a goddamn unicorn, or something like this. And then you open it up, and it basically in pen, it said like, thank you for all you do, sort of a message. And there was a Moors card inside, and I was like, oh, and it was like, go rent yourself a tux. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And I went to Moors, and it's literally like 2 days before this event, and I was like, hey, I got this card. I don't suppose there's any way I'd be able to rent a tux. And the guy goes, well, like, it's a little tight. Maybe you could buy one. And I was like, ha ha ha, fuck your face, as if I could afford that. He goes, well, let me see the card. Zoop through the little machine. He's like, well, there's $300 on here, and I can get you a tuxedo for $300. And I was like, there's how much money? Like, someone just gave me, without, I still to this day have no idea who it was, just gave me $300 for this very specific purpose. And obviously, like, we're all in a position where, of course, if they just handed me $300, I would have, preferred to use it on this. No, fuck that. That was the single coolest shit that could have happened in that moment. And I was able to buy a tuxedo, which I still own and still look amazing in. And I was able to do the award show in this tuxedo, all because of this anonymous gifter. And I think that's the coolest shit. So yeah, I support entirely that. That's just cool. I think one of my children's is home. Hello, two of my children's is home. That's probably as good a time as any for me to wrap it up. We have been live for 3.5 hours, so yeah, I will leave you with that charming story of the day that someone did a nice deed for me, based on the fact that Sugar shared the we were talking about counting poo and doing nice things, as well as the I could have killed Junior Sleep but chose not to. So thank you guys for hanging out with me. Thank you guys for watching while I stretched my little white boy brain around the idea of restorative justice, and got a better, clearer view of what's going on. You had a very lovely lady on your arm too. I always do. No, that's not true. I did. The lovely lady was phenomenally beautiful, and she still is. She's still one of my best friends. She's the friend that I helped move recently. So all of that was yeah. I don't know. My brain just stopped there. Thanks Ray for sharing. Yes, thanks Ray for being here. You were here for pretty much the whole time, and helped me understand a bunch of this and put context around things and stuff, and added a lot. So genuinely appreciated. I definitely appreciate the friendship and the additional info, because sometimes government of Canada documents and law review things aren't going to paint the full picture. So super appreciated. Thank you, and I will see you all again soon. Thanks, Jim, for kicking my brain into gear. Hey, you're welcome. I don't know what I kicked your brain into gear with, Che, but I love you. I'm always here to kick whatever part of you needs kicking, buddy. All right, you feel better. All right, and with that, in the meantime, and in between time, that's it for another edition of me talking on the internet.